Call the meeting of the Brockton City Council Finance Committee to order, November 15th, 2021. I recognize a quorum.
Mr. President, Mr. Chairman, apologies. Mr. Chairman, I'd move that we, Mr. Chairman, I move that we take item number 15 out of order and, act on it right now.
Motion to take item 15 out of order. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and properly seconded to take item 15 out of order. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Will the clerk please read item number 15?
Ordered that the following named sum be and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Appropriation of $1,955,356.19 from the stabilization fund, $1,356,621.87 to the police fiscal 20 personal services other than overtime. Retroactive payment, $167,002.40. Police fiscal 20 overtime retroactive payment of $12,719.77. Police fiscal 21 personal services other than overtime retroactive payment $345,770.27. Police fiscal 21 overtime retroactive payment $12,500.60. Police fiscal 22 personal services other than overtime $799,070.77. Police fiscal 22 overtime $19,558.06. And from the ARPA fund, $598,734.32 to the police fiscal 20 personal services other than overtime retroactive payment of $7,556.09. Police fiscal 21 personal services other than overtime retroactive payment of $100,250.94. Police fiscal 22 personal services other than overtime $355,927.29. Police COVID bonus, $135,000. For purposes of funding the Brockton Police Supervisors Union contract, this appropriation provides funding for the 3 years, July 1st, 2019 to June 30th, 2022, of a 3-year contract. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Mr. Clarkson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. The interim auditor noted these amounts are to fund full 3 years of a contract with the Police Supervisors Union. As I've stated with other contracts that have come before you, this is indeed for a full 3-year period that ends prospectively next June. And it is, in my professional opinion, both financially sound and fiscally responsible. Happy to answer any questions.
Councilors, any questions? If not, is there a motion
to recommend favorably?
Second.
Okay, been a motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Thank you, Mr. Clarkson. Madam Clerk.
Hearing. Ordered that the common necessity and convenience of the inhabitants of the city of Brockton require the laying out of Sunset Avenue extending from Bouvet Avenue easterly a distance of 337.29 feet. And for that purpose, it is necessary to take an easement for highway purposes and lay out as a public street or way of said city of Brockton. Invited Patrick Hill, interim DPW Commissioner.
Time having arrived, I declare the hearing open. For the benefit of those who are here for Bouvet Avenue, there are 2 other hearings, one for Berkeley Street and another one for Sheridan Street. We hold these hearings because they're required by law. The DPW Commissioner will make a recommendation on each of these. And then for those of you who live in those respective areas, if you want to come up and speak in favor of it, you just come up and give your name to the clerk. If you want to speak in opposition, when that portion of the hearing is opened, you would come up and speak in opposition. So it's an opportunity for those of you who live in that area to be heard when these streets are accepted as public ways. So we are focused now only on Sunset Avenue. And Mr. Hill?
The DPW doesn't have any objections to acceptance of this street, Councilor.
Thank you. Was there anyone else here in favor of acceptance? Anyone else here in favor of accepting Sunset Avenue, as outlined in the public hearing. Anyone here in favor? I'll declare that part of the hearing closed. Is there anyone here in opposition? Anyone here in opposition to acceptance of that portion of the street? Anyone here in opposition? If not, I will declare that part of the hearing closed. Question now comes on recommending favorably to the city council. The vote will be on next Monday. Is there a motion?
Move to sorry.
Second.
Go ahead, Mr. President.
Move the recommendation.
Motion made by Councilor Iannieri, seconded by Councilor Lally. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Item number 2, Madam Clerk.
Ordered that the common necessity and convenience of the inhabitants of the city of Brockton require the laying out of Berkeley Street from Rutland Square northerly to Market Street, a distance of 354.79 feet. And for that purpose, it is necessary to take an easement for highway purposes and lay out as a public street or way of said city of Brockton. Invited Patrick Hill, interim DPW Commissioner.
Commissioner?
Again, we have no objections to the street as well.
All right. I declare the hearing open. Is there anyone else here in favor? Anyone else here in favor? If not, I declare that part of the hearing closed. Is there anyone here in opposition? Anyone here who opposes acceptance of Berkeley Street? Anyone here in opposition? If not, I will declare that part of the hearing closed. The question now comes on recommending favorably to the full city council.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Been a motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably to the full city council. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Item number 3.
Ordered that the common necessity and convenience of the inhabitants of the city of Brockton require the laying out and acceptance of Sheridan Street extending from the end of the 1944 layout northerly, a distance of about 1,355 feet, more or less, to Kathleen Road, and for that purpose, it is necessary to take an easement for highway purposes and lay out as a public street or way of said city of Brockton. Invited Patrick Hill, interim DPW Commissioner.
All right, I declare the hearing open. Commissioner?
Surprisingly enough, no objections, Counselor.
Is there anyone else here in favor?
Chair.
Anyone else? Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This street is in my ward, and so prior to hearing from any constituents or those who have questions regarding this matter, Commissioner Hill, could you just kind of explain to the public what's a public way, what's a private way?
I mean, the roundabout, I mean, the general difference, Counselor, is where we're allotted to use the money. So in a private way, we're not allowed to use Chapter 90 funds, which is where the city primarily uses money for repaving. I'm sorry, oh, you can't hear?
Yeah, you can remove your mask. Yeah.
Sorry about that. The city's road reconstruction program, the Chapter 90 program, requires that a street be a public way to use the Chapter 90 funds, which is where probably 90% of our paving money comes from. So this is just a way for us to use city funds to pave the streets.
And so then a private way, what makes a street a private way?
It was never accepted by the council, so the road was constructed at some point. There was a layout, and it never got to this forum, so.
When it comes to city services, is there any difference between, other than being able to fully repave it or use Chapter 90 funds?
No,
So-
we still fix potholes, we still take care of all the infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the catch basins, you know, trees, everything is primarily the same.
So fundamentally, the difference between a public way and a private way is public ways are able to utilize Chapter 90 funds for repaving of the road. Private ways are not allowed to use those funds.
That's correct.
Would any resident expect to see, other than a potential repaving, if a road is accepted by the city to be a public way, would any resident who lives on that road expect to see any difference between one or the other?
No, I mean, we generally don't take land, if that's kind of what you're asking. I know a lot of people get concerned when we accept streets that the city's going to expand the size of the road, take a piece of their property, but that's generally never the case, unless there's an addition of a sidewalk.
All right. And just specifically for Sheridan, to answer that question, is there any intent to build a sidewalk on Sheridan Street?
Not to my knowledge.
If a sidewalk were to be built, obviously, is there another hearing or any other additional process that the city would have to go through before building that sidewalk?
I mean, once the city gets, the street gets accepted, Counselor, I guess it would be more of the counselor to kind of get out to his ward, I believe, to get out to his constituents to let them know. Certainly, we would go out and discuss it with anybody that had any questions.
Now, you just stated that there's no, not to your knowledge, any intent to build a sidewalk. Do you see any need for a sidewalk on Sheridan Street?
I mean, it is around East Middle School. In the future, is it a possibility? I suppose with Safe Routes to School, which is a program that's offered through the federal government, there's always a possibility. More sidewalks, especially around a school area, I think is a good idea. But to my knowledge, there isn't any plan to do sidewalks there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Hill, for your time. I appreciate that. No further questions, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else in favor? Anyone else here in favor of acceptance of Sheridan Street? Anyone else in favor? If not, I'll declare that part of the hearing closed. Is there anyone here in opposition to acceptance of? All right. Well, welcome all of you. Just come up one at a time, and please just give your name and make sure you're near the microphone so you can be heard.
I've been living on Sheridan Street for a good, almost 25 years now. And the problem with Sheridan Street is the people racing down the street. They go 70, 80 miles an hour down that street. Sometimes you look out, they're passing each other. They're running ATVs up and down the street. So if you were ever to pave that street, it's going to be a horror show. There's kids out there. I've seen kids on bikes that have almost gotten hit. I have a neighbor that 2 cars were racing. One hit the other one. It flipped over, went over the guardrail, went over the fence, and landed right at her front porch, almost hit her house. And this is an everyday occurrence over there. So we're all against it because, a lot of people have kids. This is crazy. If we make this way public and you pave that road, you're gonna make a highway. We have to live there. There's little kids near the road, and if one of them ever stepped out there, I worry about that every day. We have some little kids there that are always by the road. And if they ever step out, these cars aren't going to be able to stop. And you guys are talking about Bud Ave. I know this whole thing is about paving Bud Ave, but I hear people screeching out of Bud Ave all the time. That whole area, has got a problem with people speeding, with people racing. And, paving a road isn't going to fix it. And I don't know if you guys feel the same way.
Mr. Chair,
Councilor Thompson.
Hi, good evening, ma'am. My name's Jeff Thompson. I'm the Ward 5 City Councilor, and thank you for being here tonight to discuss this matter. I've spoken to a few of your neighbors. I know some of you said you were going to be out here tonight, so I just wanted to kind of give what my plan was for this area. So you mentioned Bud Ave. This is ultimately to get to Bud Ave. As you know, the condition of Bud Ave is materially, it's one of the worst streets in our city. I've talked to many people who live on Bud Ave, who are really upset about the condition of their street and the wear and tear on their vehicles, flat tires, issues of suspension, and just the whole kind of the depressing nature of a really terrible street. And so while I wanted to address Bud Ave, during that process, I learned that Bud Ave's a private way. And so, as we stated earlier, we cannot expend any Chapter 90 funds to repave that street if it's a public way. A private way. Well, I learned through the process that you cannot accept a private way as a public way if it does not abut a current public way. And so what I've learned is that this section of Sheridan is also a private way. So for me to be able to address Bud Ave, which I hope we can agree requires addressing, so to get to Bud Ave, I had to first start with Sheridan Street to get that accepted as a public way. From speaking with the DPW commissioner, looking at the material condition of Sheridan Street, it's in my opinion that Sheridan does not require to be repaved. It's in a high enough material condition that there are many other streets, including Bud Ave.
But can I interrupt a second? If you go at the beginning of Sheridan and at the end of Sheridan, we're starting to get potholes and everything else, and it's because people are ripping up and down the streets. It's only a matter of time before Sheridan Street is going to need to be paved, and once you do that, we're going to have a highway there.
I mean,
when we bought this, everybody, when you bought your house, you wanted a neighborhood for your kids to be safe in. And, and this isn't it. I feel for Bud Ave, I really do, but why should we have to pay for it?
well,
And we are, because if you're public, you're gonna make it worse for us. And we're not idiots. We know down the road, you're gonna put sidewalks there. I mean, you can sit here and say, no, we're not gonna do this at the time, but we know you are.
well,
We're
ma'am,
not idiots.
well, I would say ultimately, as the DPW commissioner said, and me myself have no intention of putting in sidewalks over at Sheridan.
Not at the moment, but
that-
like he said, there's a school there.
But ma'am, you have to understand that our city requires infrastructure improvements. Bud Ave is in terrible condition. Now, to allow that to continue for those residents because of potentially some side effects to Sheridan, I look around the city and I see what do we need to address? And Bud Ave is definitely a street that needs to be addressed. And so I want to be able to provide a well-maintained street for the residents of Bud Ave. And that's why I'm going through this process.
Is it true you have a friend that lives on Bud Ave?
Say again?
Is it true you have a friend that lives on Bud Ave?
A friend?
Yes.
I know people, but no friends. Honestly, I sit down with the DPW commissioner, and what we do is look at material condition, and Bud Ave ranks as one of the worst streets materially.
I know it's bad, but,
So that's,
the
I mean-
answer is not making it worse for the people on Sheridan.
I may not follow the logic how it makes it worse.
Well, why don't you come down there and live there for about a couple of weeks?
I mean,
And watch what goes on down there.
Councilor Thompson?
if there are traffic issues, I'd be more than willing to discuss trying to mitigate speeding or other traffic issues.
We
But
had that. They put the speed thing on there, and nobody pays attention to it. That we had to stay, one day I called them, because there were people going 90 miles an hour up the street, and they sent a state trooper down there for 2 days, and that was fine for 2 days, but then he left, and everybody started speeding up and down the street again.
I just see these as two separate issues, ma'am. Bud Ave is in terrible condition, and I
I know
think
you're
it,
stuck on Bud Ave, but, the answer is not making it worse for the residents on
Chairman.
Sheridan.
Councilor Thompson, could I?
Yep.
I don't know if this would be helpful, but
okay?
we have to act on this before the end of the legislative session. However, would it be helpful if you postponed this to the next FinCom and you had a chance to speak with the neighbors? Is that something you'd like to do? Or do you want to go forward this evening? It's up to you.
I mean, it's my intent to have this accepted as a public way. I'm comfortable moving forward, but I would definitely, if there are other issues regarding traffic, speeding on Sheridan, those are issues I'd be more than happy to sit down and try to bring in front of the Traffic Commission to try to mitigate those issues. But it-
Could we just, ma'am, could we just have your name for the record, and then I'll have each...
Okay, yeah, Barbara Madar, M-A-D-A-R.
Thank you. If someone else wants to come up, and if she has outlined the issue, you don't need to,
No, there's more issues than what she said.
all right?
Hi.
Just give your name to the clerk, please.
Hi, my name's Lauren Conway. I have a bunch of issues. The speeding's one. The other one is the flooding. Our street floods unbelievable. I've been put out of my home so many times because my house gets surrounded with water. They've had to carry me and my son out of my house, shut the power off. I've had to gut my whole house because of the flooding, and all the water comes down from Bud Ave and pools into my yard, other people's yard, their basement. The cars have floated out of my neighbor across the street's driveway because of the flooding there. So to pave this road is just gonna make it even worse because of the drainage issues. Second of all, I don't want my property taken away. I do not feel that down the road that they're not gonna put a sidewalk. We're right beside East Junior High. I've been in my house for almost 30 years. I grew up on the next street over, Ida Ave. So I've grown up in that neighborhood for almost 60 years. It's always been a private way. I have very limited land on my property. I have 20 feet behind my house and probably like 30, 35 feet in front of my house. If they put a sidewalk, that'll leave me with no land in my front. I'll have no front yard, I have no backyard as it is right now. It'll take away half my property, and I will have no property. So then my value goes down on my house, and for me to go to sell my house down the road, I'd lose all my value in my house, along with my neighbors who have the same limited property too. And I understand the part, Bud Ave's terrible, yes, but that's Bud Ave. This is like my life. I've worked so hard to get this house. Our neighbors have worked hard to get their properties, and to go down, there's no guarantee that you cannot tell me they're not gonna put a sidewalk in. And when they put the sidewalk in, the drainage gets even worse, and then I'm homeless again because my house floods again. And I've gone to the city numerous times on the flooding. We've gone to the city numerous times on the speeding, on everything, and there's no thing. I don't understand why you have to make Sheridan. Why can't you make Kathleen the public way and leave Sheridan alone? Why can't, what about the other two streets that come off of 123 that go into there? Why can't they be made the public way in Sheridan? We have so many issues, all our neighbors, with the flooding, with everything, the speeding. Half of Sheridan needs paving already. So, like, I don't want to lose my land. I barely have any land as it is, and I'm sorry. You know, I have to think about me and my future, and I can't do it, and
Councilor
just
Thompson, would you
too
yield
much.
for a minute? I think Councilor Lally had something that he wanted to offer.
Sure, go ahead.
Councilor Lally?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good.
Good. I've been down in the neighborhood. I spent some time down there over the summer. So I just wanted to say, I'm the counselor for Ward 6, which is just north of you. And we have a lot of very similar neighborhoods. I live in a Campanelli myself, and a lot of these neighborhoods are Campanelli sort of neighborhoods. The road as it stands right now is private, and I'm talking to you just about Sheridan. Bud is, not a part of the question for me. I'm talking just about Sheridan. Your road's private.
Yep.
That means that you pay the same taxes, fees, and bills as everyone else in the city of Brockton, but your road is not eligible to be paved. Right now, it's if you wanted it done, you'd have to do it yourself, which is a little ridiculous. You're talking about, expenses and, all the things you have to worry about financially. Paving a road's a significant undertaking. There's a reason the government's got to do it, because, it's a huge expense. So basically, making your road public from one day to the next, from 1 week to the next, there's not any change of note significantly. There's just I know what you're gonna say. But basically, what we would do is if we voted to make this road public, you'd wake up the next day and everything would look and be and feel the same. Your road would just now be eligible to be paved. The city would have an easement into your lawn to take if they wanted to put in a sidewalk. They may. Someday they may decide to put in a sidewalk. You are right next to East. That's a fact. However, from my experience, and I know you might not believe it, but I am one of the older members. Infrastructure money is not that readily available. You know, there are a lot of roads that need to be paved. There are a lot of pipes that need to be redone. Water pressure is not always, you know, a great wonder. Drainage is a huge issue on your street and all over the city. That kind of stuff gets done with infrastructure money. Infrastructure money that could also go to sidewalks. So in my personal experience, I've had some sidewalks put in my area, never where anyone didn't want them, because we don't, you know, if you don't want them, we don't have to spend the money on them. Is basically, you know, cutting it short. If you don't want sidewalks, the city could take that money and put it on a street that wanted sidewalks. So the city's never going to be, you know, financially solid enough to just go sidewalks no matter what, because they can,
They
you know.
did Gladstone Street, and Gladstone Street's a mess now.
Well,
You know, the people over there are complaining that they hate the sidewalk. It made the road narrower. They paved that road, people speed up
Well,
and
that
down.
could be, yeah,
If
that's.
you pave our road, people are gonna fly. I've almost lost 2 dogs that got loose by
Yeah.
people running out. I've almost been hit going across the street to talk to my neighbors on numerous occasions
So
because
I
the
will-
cars fly down my road.
So people are speeding now, right? They're
Yep.
speeding now. They get the ATVs out now. You got the problems now.
We've always had the speeding on our street.
Exactly,
always.
exactly. So what I would say is when you leave, put together an email or something, a contact, or reach out to your counselor, and your counselor can bring you to the traffic commission. The traffic commission can come out and review, you know, how the road is set up, what kind of laws or rules they could put, speed limit, things like that.
We've done all that.
And then for ATVs, the traffic, if you email traffic, they are able to address them as well. But basically, if anything's to happen with your road, the road's getting into rough shape, you have problems with the drainage, that stuff cannot be done if your road is private. So
If they've fixed it before, they've done the pipe and everything.
they own the pipes underneath, but they
Yeah.
don't own the road. So if you want, you know, stuff to the road done, so this is not about Bud, at least for me. This
Yeah.
is about Sheridan.
Right.
And Sheridan is in rough shape. It's only gonna get rougher. What has to happen is if this road is made public, it puts you on the same playing field as everyone else. You're then eligible to get your road paved or have any other work done to it that needs to be done. But if you don't, you know, we're planning years out. The roads, I've brought roads up before to make them public that people have wanted to be made public. And they, you know, I don't know if I'll be the counselor when they get paved. It could be a very long way away, but the simple fact of the matter is it's about making sure this is set up to do the best we can for you and your street.
Right, but all our neighbors here, there's 3 rows right there of neighbors, we don't want it public. So we've got 3 rows of people that don't want it public. We don't want our land taken away. And there's no 100% guarantee that you can tell me you're not gonna come and take part of my property 2 years, 1 year, tomorrow, the next day, or whatever. I mean,
Councilor Lally, there always has to be a bad guy in every party, and I have to move this along. So, Councilor Thompson, would you mind if Councilor Rodriguez offered a comment?
Sure, of course.
Councilor Rodriguez.
You have to ask him? I didn't know that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Council Lally said that he was one of the old guys here in the body. He's not. There's a lot more older folks sitting here, not just age-wise, but as far as duration on the council.
You gotta repeat that, Counselor, I'm hard of hearing.
Okay. But I have never, and I've been here 8 years, this is my 8th year, and I've never been in this council when there was a proposal for a conversion from a private to a public street, where we've had this many opposition to it. And since we are a representative form of government, we're supposed to be representing the wishes of the taxpayers or the residents of that street. I don't see how we, as is today at this moment, that we're going to take a vote to force feed the residents of that area with a public street when they do not want a public street. I didn't hear anybody here getting up when we were asking for those in favor, coming up speaking in favor of it. And there's a ton of people who are against it. We're not much smarter than anybody that's sitting back there. So if this is the wish of the residents, and I too am a counselor for that ward, because I'm an at-large counselor and represent all of you folks. So if you folks feel that you do not want your street to be paved, I will be voting not to have your street paved or turn your street into a public street if that's not your wish. And shame on us for not taking you seriously as a group of people that took your time to come here today to express your wishes in front of this body. This, like I said, it's never happened before. Usually people are clapping because they want their streets turned into a public street. And if you folks are against it, so am I, and I'm sure there's others in here that feel the same way. That again, as a representative form of government, we're here to represent you, and if that's what you wish, that's the wish that I at least personally am going to go with. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, councilors, I'd like to move this along, and I thank the young lady. If there's someone else who would like to just say, I agree with her, just come up and give your name, and we'll have opposition on the record, so.
Good evening. My name is Ramonde Bissoet, and I live in Sheridan Street. And I've been living in Sheridan for 6 years, and I don't want any sidewalk. So there's been a little issue, speeding, the snow is not been clean. I'm always snacking in my driveway. So if it's not making anything better for us, it's fine just the way it is.
All right, thank you. And the next person, please. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. My name is Marcia Deal. I live on Sheridan Street. I've been there 22 years now. I thank you for allowing us to be here to express our opinion on this. I won't reiterate what my other neighbors have already said, but what I will say is I do feel that somewhere down the line that our street will be widened, our sidewalks will be taken without any compensation to us. But again, if you widen that street, it's only going to make things worse. I worry more about the speeding. My neighbor already mentioned the one car accident. It was actually 3 cars that were drag racing, not 2, it was 3 cars. And I myself, where my house is, I suffer greatly from the flooding because every time it rains, I end up with a puddle in front of my driveway that lasts almost 2 weeks sometimes. So, you know, we do beg of you to reconsider this. I do understand that Bud Ave needs to be paved, but at the same time, is there not another way to make that happen for them? Can you not change the rule that says you can't appropriate funds from whatever it is that you need? Is there not another way around it by making this public street, private street public and enforcing undue affliction upon the rest of the residents on Sheridan Street? So I ask you to reconsider and find another way to do it for Bud Ave.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask one question, please?
Councilor Monahan.
I just want to ask you one question, and I understand your concerns, but the thought is this. It could be 20 years from now. That road could be deteriorated to nothing, gravel, and you will not get a paved road. So are you willing to not work? Councilor Thompson will be happy to work with you as far as speeding, all these other problems, but you got to realize if you're not a public road, you are not going to get anything done to that road. There's not going to be potholes fixed. There's not going to be a new road. When that thing goes 20 years from now, I work in the city all the time driving around. I go down Sheridan. That is a mess. So that's all I'm just saying is that down the road, now you need drainage. You're not getting drainage. if you are a public road, you're, like he said, you're gonna have all these things, Council Thompson can bring it to the DPW Commissioner, Pat Hill, and say, hey, they need some drainage down there, bring the engineers in, boom, 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 possibly get done. So all these good things can happen.
Well, we've asked for that, and we haven't gotten it. So I can
Because you're a
understand,
private road.
I can understand that, I can understand, but, 20 years down the road, maybe you'll find another way to do paving, and we can get Sheridan Street paved then. But right now, Sheridan Street is really not that bad. Sheridan Street's issues are the speeding and the flooding.
Right, and
Those
drainage.
are our issues right now.
And drainage is not gonna happen unless it's a public road.
Well, drainage is already
All
an
right.
issue.
I know that, but I mean, to fix it. But anyway, if that, you people
But-
are willing
but
to
let me tell you
have
this.
that,
One of the
then
things that
they'll
people
know.
look for when they buy a house is they look for a neighborhood. They look for a neighborhood that's safe for their children, a neighborhood that maybe they can continue to live in, pass on to their children. And right now, if you do this, it's going to become even worse than it is. Eventually, you will widen that street. Eventually, you'll make sidewalks there, and the speeding will just get worse.
All right, well, if you're willing to accept that consequences, I'm fine.
Well, I'd rather have the flooding over the speeding,
And that could be
honestly.
fixed, but I'm just going for infrastructure, and I just can't see it, but,
Councilors?
okay, thank you anyway.
Councilors, I've allowed leeway here because we do have people who took time out to come here. What's really supposed to happen is we're supposed to listen to the different people that come up and either express their opposition or their support for this, and it's not really supposed to be an interactive process at this point. I did that on purpose because I think it's important to allow people, if nothing else, to vent a little bit about their issues, and that's how we find out about them. But I do want to go back to the structure of the hearing, and if there's someone else who would like to come up and give their name and indicate that they support the prior statements, we'll enter that into the record. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi. My name is Bonnie. I've been on Sheridan for 27 years in December. My questions also are pertaining to the letter itself. It says shown on Exhibit A, but we never saw anything that shows Exhibit A. So that concerned me. And it says being 50 feet variable in width. Where I am, the street is 30 feet. So that's another 20 feet that I'm concerned about if they do a sidewalk on the, like I live closer to Center Street, it'll take some of my front stairs. So I'm just wondering, and it says no awards. So I would like just a little bit more explanation about what that means. I did come here this morning, and I forgot to ask about the Exhibit A. So it would be helpful if,
Madam Clerk, do you know if, do we mail these notices out, Madam Clerk? And if so, would they have been an Exhibit A, if you know?
We mail the letters out from our office, but it comes from engineering. So I would refer you to call engineering, and they might be able to supply you with that Exhibit A.
yeah, so I do work full-time, and I took time out this morning, and I went up there, and the man that I spoke to, and I didn't take his name, I should have, he told me, oh, no, they're not going to take property, they're just going to take the street. But then I realized our street is, where I am, is 30 feet wide. So I'm just wondering, are they going to expand that section of the road? And if so, what are they going to do with my front stairs and also my neighbor?
Mr. Chair?
Councilors, before I go to Councilor Thompson, I'm just going to renew the chair's suggestion that this be postponed, especially with attachment A, if they did not receive it. It looks like it's the list of abutters, but I'm not sure. Councilor Thompson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So obviously, it looks like potentially I need to do a better job of communicating, you know, what the process is and substantively what this all really means. So I would like to postpone this matter. I'd make a motion to postpone to our next Finance Committee meeting. It is my intent to hold a public meeting with the residents of Sheridan to better answer your questions regarding the exhibits, what it specifically means. But I also want, you know, as Councilor Rodriguez says, this is a representative form of government, but we're also here to do what's in the best interest of the city, right? And that's what I'm trying to get done here. I'm trying to do what I believe is in the best interests of Brockton. And so I just, you know, that's also something I'm concerned about. So again, I'll make a motion to postpone, and I would plan to have a meeting so I can better explain what this process is, what I'm trying to get done, and answer any questions that, you know, that you may have. Thank you for coming tonight, ma'am.
All right, councilors, there's a motion to postpone, recess this hearing and postpone it to the next FinCom. I don't know who seconded that.
Second.
All right, motion made and properly seconded. All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. So for our residents who took time to come out, this has been postponed. Councilor Thompson is going to get together with you. We sincerely thank you for coming in this evening. If you want to leave your name with the clerk, even if you didn't speak, so that Councilor Thompson has your information, we can certainly do that. But again, our thanks for coming down here with us on a Monday evening. He'll get together with you, ma'am, and Madam Clerk. You're welcome.
Appointment of Paula Kokoros Oderno of 57 Reservoir Street, Brockton, to the Zoning Board of Appeals Associate Member for a 3-year term ending October 2024. Invited Paula Kokoros Oderno.
Councilors, that should be tabled. The candidate asked to voluntarily withdraw from her nomination.
Motion to table.
Second.
Been a motion made to table this matter. All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Councilor Iannieri, I'm going to speak on the next issue, so would you assume the presiding officer's chair, please?
Behave yourself, everybody, because there's only a few more times I can, you know what I mean?
Appointment of Iolando Spinola of 23 Noyes Ave, Brockton, to Zoning Board of Appeals Associate Member for a 3-year term ending October 2024. Invited Iolando Spinola.
Right up to the podium. Hi, how are you?
Hello, how are you doing today?
Welcome. Anything you'd like to say before the council, before they ask any questions of you?
I'll take off my mask, if that's okay?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody, for considering me for this opportunity to join the Zoning Board of Appeal. I grew up in Brockton and very much believe that this city can grow and be a beautiful place to raise a family and just to experience, to live and to play and to grow and just to be great. And I want the city to continue to make the investments, both privately and publicly, for us to grow in a smart and productive way. And I think it can be done within the rules and regulations. And I want to play a role in impacting the city when it comes to land use, considering like community planning and taking the considerations of the community when it comes to like impacting the experience of our city and how it privately develops. I'm a community engagement professional, and I get to participate in building like civic infrastructure for community members to impact how their city looks like and what their towns look like. I get to do that in Metro Boston, and I would love to bring my experience and my knowledge to the residents here of Brockton and to serve the city. I have an understanding of like zoning regulations. I have an understanding of like what property owners have to think about in regards to hardship. And zoning is a very complicated thing, and the more we can make that accessible and easy for people to navigate, it would allow us to get a lot more things done. And I would love to make sure that we have a process in place that people can impact their development in a way that it's within the law. I hope that I can serve the city at the pleasure of the citizens and of the mayor. So if you have any questions, I can answer it for you today, but thank you for your time and consideration.
Very good, thank you. Council Fowle?
I agree. Councilor Azak can go first.
Council Azak first.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Spinola. First of all, thank you for wanting to serve. It's dedication of your time, and we appreciate that. Do you speak different languages? Do you have background in languages?
Yeah, I speak Cape Verdean Creole, so moved
You're
to the
fluent?
United States when I was 4, and yeah, speak that. That's what my family speaks at home, so never lost that.
You're fluent in Cape Verdean Creole and obviously in English as well, so very good. Well, thank you. That was my only question to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Council Fowle?
Good evening, Mr. Spinola. Hello. You have an exceptional academic background. My concern is your experience and knowledge of zoning to be able to serve on the ZBA. I'm particularly interested in the ZBA because we recently had a decision by that board which now has necessitated some residents to spend between $10,000 and $20,000 to challenge in land court that decision. And it was a decision that actually the chair himself cautioned the board against making. So to me, serving on the ZBA, particularly where one vote can mean so much of a difference. I guess my first question is, what experience have you had at a zoning meeting? Have you attended any zoning meetings anywhere?
Yes, I have attended zoning meetings, but they're mostly like at a capacity of like observation or being able to give guidance to municipal officials after the fact. But I've also attended other municipal meetings other than zoning board meetings. So examples would be like just town meetings in general. Planning board meetings are probably the ones that I frequent the most. But in regards to like my zoning experience, I'm not a zoning expert by any means, but I do have experience on the topic of just land use and planning. I work for a regional planning agency, and we do consider like zoning, and we look at like how zoning should be like both enforced and how it should change over time. And then I've participated in different housing production plans for different municipalities, Melrose being one of the one municipality, and I've helped with the community engagement aspect of that. So taking in consideration what community members are sharing in regards to that, and that's going to impact the future of their housing production plan. But I do have a slight experience in understanding of like looking at maps and infrastructure, both the land use of it and like architecture design. So I look at that stuff, but I'm not a professional, but I will be on the board, I think, with other people who have a lot of understanding of that stuff, and I will definitely be leaning on them to learn and to grow in that area, and then and for them to influence my decisions too. But then at the end of the day, the thing that would impact my decision the most is the land use regulation, and specifically the letter of the law. So I understand that there might have been some issues in the past, but I think as long as you adhere to the regulations and to the law, you should, I think you should be able to be okay.
What is a special permitted use?
A special permission?
No, special permitted use. What is a special permitted use?
So within zoning, you have to, like, there's a specific way that it has to be done. And in order for you to do it slightly different for maybe a developer or somebody who owns a property wants to do it slightly different because they have some type of hardship or some type of burden, and they can't follow that regulation specifically, so then they would ask for a permit from the city in order for them, like a special permit, in order for it to be done slightly differently. And then they would come in front of the board to see if those hardships are real, or if those hardships, it can be mitigated in other ways, and they just haven't considered it. And what are other community members saying in regards to that special permit, and if it impacts them in any way?
Okay, well, you commingled something else in there, then what is the variance? If you're sworn in, the very next day, you might have to sit at a ZBA meeting as a full voting member. What is a variance?
Well, a variance would be what is slightly, so what, if you're asking for a variance, or?
No, someone comes to you and they want a variance on a piece of property. What is a variance, and what are the criteria under the law that has to be followed in order to grant that variance? And the reason I ask you is because your vote is very important.
No, I just don't have this, I don't have this specific definition and language top of mind, and I don't want to like misspeak it, but yeah, thank you for pushing me to have that completely clarified. But I would say I have an understanding of the variance. I'm probably gonna trip myself right now trying to explain what it is, but and I'll do that right now. So a variance is basically you're trying to have your specific piece of property. You want to get that adjustment. You want to get that adjustment to move forward with development, right? So you're asking the city, can I have this? Can I have this leeway, or can I have this way for us to do this without, outside of the regulation? So the city's gonna give you like a basically like slightly different approach for you to move forward. Is that correct, or?
I'm gonna stop at this point, and I'm gonna be honest with you. I think you would be perfect if you were on the planning board because you know land use. I just cannot support someone for the ZBA, particularly given what just happened and how it would affect constituents of mine and constituents of others, that they have to spend their money to correct a terrible wrong that was done contrary to statute and case law. And I just can't vote for someone who doesn't have at least some rudimentary understanding of Chapter 40A zoning, what it's about, how it applies, if they don't have some understanding of ordinances and how they apply, and it's not personal.
That's fair.
I think you would be an exceptional candidate for something other than the ZBA.
Okay.
But I thank you for answering my question.
Thank you.
I have a question.
All set, Counsel?
All set, thank you.
Counsel Rodriguez, and then Counsel Dick.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're getting into an area here where we're opening up a can of worms that I don't think we're going to be able to close. Again, I've been sitting on this board for the last almost 8 years, and I have never heard a qualified resident coming in front of this body volunteering their time and effort to a position that could easily be learned. Not that I know of, but I don't think none of us were born even knowing how to read and write our names down. Somebody has to teach us that. And if somebody who's willing to learn, to me, it makes very little sense that, and if we start this, I just want to make sure that there will be individuals coming down in front of this body that some of us will do exact the same thing no matter who it is. It could be the Secretary of Human Services from the United States of America looking to become a I don't know, a social worker in Brockton, some of us are going to oppose to that just because of what it sounds like. I want to make sure that if we're willing to open up this can of worms, that we're going to be able to close it. Because to me, it sounds very unfair to sit here and grill volunteers, people who are willing to come forward and help us better the city, bring some diversity, bring some language skills into a board that frankly has none right now. To me, it makes absolutely no sense that we're going to turn away a candidate who could easily spend a week with the chair of that body and learn exactly what to do. The chair is one of the most knowledgeable individuals that I know of, but I'm quite sure he wasn't born that way. He basically learned it as he went along, exactly what some of these rules and regs were, through job experience, through listening, and I'm quite confident that this gentleman will be able to do the same thing, and I will be voting to support him because, again, none of us were born with that knowledge, and that knowledge is learned, and if he's willing to learn and he's willing to study it, I'm sure by the time they have their first meeting, he will know exactly what a variance is. I'm sure he will know exactly what some of these other things that we're talking about. So to me, we're touching some dangerous areas here. And if we're willing to go that way, it's going to be a long season in this board because there's going to be a lot of individuals standing on that podium there that some of us are going to object just for the sake of objecting. And that's something that would be unfortunate and something that we should not go into. And I mean, we owe it to the mayor. I'm not saying because he's a friend or anybody, but if he puts forward somebody's name, we've had this package in our hands for over a week. We should have found out from the mayor, from the candidate himself, so that we don't have to sit here and grill residents who are willing to put their names forward to become a contributing member of this city. So I find that honestly disheartening in a way, and I hope that's not the road that we're going to go through as we move forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Mayor, can I take Councilor Cardoza first? Yeah, she had her hand before you, and Councilor Cardoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Spinola, I sat on zoning for 2 years. I'm a registered nurse. I knew nothing about zoning, nothing at all. And I learned quite a bit from the chair. He's very knowledgeable. I learned from my colleagues, and I did very well. I think the problem with zoning is not the people who are sitting on the zoning board. It's our zoning laws in general. They're antiquated and they need to be changed. They're hard to understand. It's also educating our residents around zoning, so when they come in front of the board, that they're prepared. So language equity, making sure we have information in languages that people speak and understand. Those are the issues that we should tackle. I sat there many a nights where people came in front of us unprepared. They couldn't speak the language and all of that. And I think that we have a lot of work to do on educating our residents, and I think someone like yourself, you seem, I've worked with you in different capacities. I've seen different advocacy that you've done in the community would be exactly what we need to help people in this community understand those zoning laws and how to navigate those systems so that they're successful. Just, you know, a lot of the folks that come in front of us with fancy lawyers and a lot of money, their projects pass like that. But then other residents who don't understand, they don't have the money, they don't have fancy lawyers, we deny them. So we need more people on the board that can help our residents navigate those systems. And I think you would be perfect. So, and I would be voting yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Mayor Sullivan, please.
Yes, please. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. So, first of all, I want to thank Mr. Spinola. As you know, since I've stood before you on every board and commission, we do a pledge. We do a social media pledge asking citizens that want to volunteer. Mr. Spinola originally applied for planning, although you just ratified the woman that's an architect to the planning board. So when I vetted him out, much like I vet out every candidate that's applied, they have to do a resume and a letter of interest. And then myself and Brady Winston, my office, we did a Zoom with Mr. Spinola, and I asked him a lot of questions, very similar to the questions that were asked today. But he is a professional planner, and that's a value that I believe ZBA needs, number one. Number two, he articulated to me that it's an alternate position. He has a young family, but he could commit to the time to do that. So, you know, I don't take it willy-nilly to put people forward. I think it's a really important thing. I served on the planning board for 2 years before I was elected to the city council. but I do believe Mr. Spinola has a skill and has a desire, or I wouldn't have put him before you. So I humbly ask for your support this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Castro?
Thank you.
Yep.
Good evening, Mr. Spinola. Good to see you. I just wanted to mention to you, I'm grateful to you for applying. And there is an organization out of UMass Boston called the Citizens Planner Collaborative.
Yeah, I know
and-
them, yeah.
And you're familiar with
them,
it.
yeah.
And in my years of serving on the planning board and the zoning board, I attended their seminars. Some were even held in Brockton. I had to go into Boston for some. Very, very, very helpful for background. And I would recommend that to you.
Thank you, yeah, I'll definitely look more into it.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Is there anyone else that hasn't had a turn before we go back to Council
Favorably.
Fowle?
I had my hand up, so,
Oh, sorry, I withdraw.
yeah.
Who made the motion?
Well, before the motion, I had my hand up. I want to make a comment.
Let me go back to Council Fowle, then I'll go back to, okay?
Go back to
Councilor
Fowle,
Azak?
okay.
Oh, yeah. I wanted just to respond to Councilor Rodriguez. I make no apologies for asking questions about the qualifications, the background, and the experience that a nominee may have for a critically important position in the city. Whether someone volunteers or not, they still should have some modicum of understanding about the task that they're going to be given and the vote that they're going to be taking as citizens come forward and ask for relief from the zoning board. I even mentioned, as you know in my earlier remarks, I think as a planning expert, he would be wonderful for the planning board. But as an alternate to the ZBA, who literally could be sworn in one day and then the meeting is the next day, we would have developers, citizens, engineers, lawyers coming before that ZBA. And this gentleman has really absolutely no understanding of how that board functions, the statutes, the case law that governs zoning. And that's why I would respectfully say, and by the way, you mentioned that during the campaign. You took a lot of heat by saying some of the candidates have no idea what they're doing and they're running for office. And I remember you got excoriated, but yet you were right. Some of them had no idea how local government functioned. And I felt badly that you took that hit because you were questioning basic understanding, knowledge, and qualifications. So I'm going to continue to do that, and I would hope everyone sitting here would do the same thing to everyone who comes in for the critically important positions in this city. And if we don't, shame on us. If we don't do that, then we're not fulfilling our responsibilities to this community, to find out if we're putting the right people in the right places with the right qualifications. And again, I make no apologies for it. I think Mr. Spinola is an excellent candidate for something. In my mind, I just don't think it's zoning. And I thank the chair.
Okay, Councilor Azak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to thank you again, Mr. Spinola, and I hope, first of all, I want to compliment you because not too many people would have been able to answer the questions being put on the spot right then and there, and even people that are probably serving now on zoning wouldn't have been able to answer. But thank you, and I hope people at home, residents, after this evening still want to serve on our boards because it's very important. We rely on our boards. I attend a lot of zoning meetings, and it's a lot of it, every applicant's different, and you learn as you go. Nobody has the answers before serving, and actually, I think you do know a little bit about zoning. You said you've attended meetings, you've witnessed them, so I'm going to support you this evening, and in supporting you, I'm supporting future residents that are going to apply to be on our boards, because I believe that you will learn. You will learn. I believe there is a workshop as well as a training, and the chairman is a wealth of knowledge. I know he will support you and will be happy to have members on the board, so thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I move to recommend this favorably back to the full city council.
On the motion, Councilor Monahan.
Just one more thing, and I appreciate it. We're lucky to have people that will give their time. So it's a lot of time, they don't get paid for it. But just remember, and I understand it's your questions, but We're elected to the city council, and I'll bet you 9 out of 10 have no idea. You have to learn what to do in the city council. And this man is willing to give his time. I talked to Mr. May earlier. He's in favor, the mayor. He's a good candidate, smart guy. He's a heck of a lot smarter than I am. Look at me, I'm in city council.
That's right.
But seriously, I think the guy will, I think he will do a great job. I had to get a few shots in there, man. No, but seriously, thank you for volunteering, and I'm sure you'll do fine. Thank you.
Motion's been made and second to send it back to the full city council. All in favor? Opposed? It goes back to the full city council. It will be heard again next Monday evening for a final appointment. And thank you for wanting to step up to the plate and be a part of the team. So appreciate it very much. Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor?
Thank you. Thank you. Madam Clerk, next one up.
Ordered in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, recommending that the City Council authorize the appropriation up to an amount of $34,590,793 from unappropriated estimated receipts American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, disbursement for purposes of COVID response, mitigation, and prevention activities. These funds are to be expended at the sole discretion of the mayor without a detrimental impact on the continuous provision of the existing level of municipal services. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Shannon Resnick, Legislative Counsel.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor.
As a committee, I want to first of all thank you for having this. I know this was postponed because Attorney Resnick and Attorney Bridges and CFO needed to chat. I think it's important to continue the conversation. You know, there is a consensus, and I know that Mr. President has reached out to the CFO, and I was privy to some of the emails. Listen, we're talking about a heck of a lot of money, right? I do want to take a moment to thank the federal delegation, Congressman Lynch, Markey, Senator Markey, and Senator Warren are helping us. We're going to get additional money on the infrastructure. The ARPA money, American Rescue Plan, on the city side is $34 million, right? 17 this year that we already have in the bank, and another 17 million coming in the queue. Projected another $4 million of ARPA money that Brockton will benefit from the ARPA funds that will go to Plymouth County. And then the delegation on the State House, the House side is already advocating for another pot of ARPA money coming in from Beacon Hill that will trickle down to Brockton. Right now, it's being vetted out on the Senate side. So what's before you tonight is how the money should be spent. And I know Attorney Resnick and Troy are going to opine. I can just tell you this. The way that I read the guidelines from Department of Revenue is that the Chief Executive Office, in this case the mayor, has the authority on how to spend the money. That's how I interpret it, and I believe that's what the lawyer is going to say. And I don't think that's wrong, but I will make a pledge to you right now because that's how I do it. I want to work with you, and I'm going to work with the next legislative session as well. If that's what you hear tonight, and that's what the Department of Revenue guidelines, I believe, state, we're going to have to work together to figure out the biggest bang for the buck. So I'm going to want to meet with Ward 4 and Ward 5 and Ward 6 and Ward 2 and the councils at large that serve the entire 7 wards. I'm going to meet with the president, whoever he or she is, next legislative session. But what's before you right now is how the money is going to be spent and who has the authority. And I believe when you read that guideline, it does say that the CEO, the executive, has the ability to do that. But I'd like Troy to be able to opine on some stuff, and I know Attorney Resnick, and I just want to say Shannon has worked hours on this. I want that to be on the record. She has worked extremely diligent on this. Thank you.
Mr. Clarkson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the council. Over my right shoulder, I have the cavalry if I need it. We've discussed this, and when we discussed this the first time, I won't quote it verbatim, but what I said to you was aspirational in that I hoped that the technicalities of how the money was to be handled would be irrelevant because we would have, all of us, the big we, would have the opportunity to communicate, that councilors would provide input on what projects and spending were important to all of you, that we would gather information from the public, which we've done. We've conducted, I should say we are conducting a community survey, and to date, nearly 200 responses from Brockton residents. They've shared their thoughts, and I plan to share those details with you in my office. One of our financial analysts who has an expertise in data analysis has taken a look at the specific responses and categorized them by gender and by race and by age so that we really can dig into the details and understand what's important for Brockton residents. However, the specific question about how to handle the money has come up, and I know there are some differing opinions. And so what we believe, what I believe, what the mayor just stated he believes, is that the guidance from the Department of Revenue is pretty clear, and that this should be handled as a federal grant. In response to my providing the DLS bulletin to you, the chairman raised a very legitimate point about sort of having it both ways, because we've already been before you and asked you to allocate some of those funds to some of the union contracts. And I acknowledge to you all in an email, and I'll acknowledge it here, that that's an excellent and a very valid point. The way we have proceeded has been imperfect. This is unprecedented, certainly in my career. I can't think of a time where this volume, this much federal money has been made available and literally in one lump sum deposited in the city's bank account. And so we're just sort of feeling our way through these uncharted waters and trying to figure it out. But the most important point is that we have been seeking and will seek your input and the public's input on the funding priorities for this money. So I'm happy to address the specific guidance from the Department of Revenue about treating this as a federal grant. I'm certain that the Legislative Council will share her thoughts with you as well. But I hope that the most important message that we all come away from tonight with is that we're going to continue to work very closely, and I'll report to you on a monthly or quarterly basis, whatever you deem appropriate, so that we are approaching the appropriation of this money as we should as a team. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Councilor Cardoza.
Good evening, Mr. Clarkson. So what portion of this money are we now treating as a grant? We've already voted on some of these funds for the union contract, as you just stated. So what portion of this money are we now, or are we backtracking saying that, we're treating the entire amount as a grant? It needs to be clear, what are we voting on here?
Excellent point. So for clarification purposes, and the motion before you is for the entirety of the amount that was provided by the federal government.
Well, we've already voted on some of it that went to the contracts. We just did that today, so.
So technically, what this is asking you to do is authorizing an appropriation up to a certain amount. What we asked you to do with the union contracts was to move that money from one place that it exists, an ARPA fund, into another area to actually fund the contracts. So I would say to you that the actions that you took related to the union contracts in this action are different. So this is actually authorizing the appropriation up to that ceiling of the amount. What the union contract votes were asking you to do was to actually move the money around like you would with a transfer. Technicality, but I think it's a valid point.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Mr. Clarkson, I just have a point of information that I'd like to get into the record. You said that we were in uncharted territory and you're relying on a DLS advisory. The fact of the matter is the DLS advisory has been out since June. And yet the appropriations, and that's what it says in item 15 tonight. It says the order says an appropriation following name sum B and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor. You have from the stabilization fund and then you have from the ARPA fund. So as a point of information, you have in fact used ARPA funds to fund provisions of collective bargaining agreements, but yet now you're saying, whoops, wait a minute, they should be treated as grant funds And basically, you want us to authorize the acceptance of the 34 million and allow the mayor to spend it as he sees fit, because then that covers what's already been done. I mean, isn't that the honest evaluation of what we're doing?
Absolutely. Yeah, I won't quarrel with that. Yeah. I readily said to you tonight and in public, the way that we've gone about this is imperfect. And what we're trying to do is, as I mentioned in the email to you, to make sure we're using best practices moving forward.
I'll let some other councilors weigh in. Go ahead, Councilor Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Clarkson, I believe the way we left this thing last time is that we were going to look into creating a stabilization type of an account or some sort of a savings account or whatever it is, the terminology that we can use, put the money in it, and then basically draw down from it like you're really drawing down from a stabilization account until the money is technically gone. Wouldn't that take care of a lot of the issues that we're seeing here?
We did look into that. One of the challenges was that the creation, if we create that revolving account,
right,
then it cannot be used into the following fiscal year, so it would hamstring us and not be able to use this money for several months hence.
But is there another way to look into not necessarily a revolving account, but just some sort of a place where it's like a placeholder for these funds so that they could be drawn out from it? Because I too feel uncomfortable. Again, nothing wrong with the current mayor, but as we move forward with God knows what additional fundings might be coming, through the city for whatever reasons, to basically look at and say, well, the legislative body whose responsibility it is to hold on to the strings, the purse strings, now all of a sudden you're handing a pot of money over to the chief executive officer for he or her to do whatever they feel like doing. That's the problem that some of us are having, where you're asking us to basically appropriate pennies at times, $200, $300 to pay for overtime, to pay for this, to pay for that, and yet there's $35 million that we're looking at. We're saying, well, here's $35 million, good luck. And that's the problem that some of us are having with this. It's not that we don't trust what the funds are going to be used for, because the necessities of the city, we can all see what the necessities are, but it's just the how, to a point where you're actually, and I've looked into this with the MMA folks, and they're saying that each municipality is doing it whichever way they feel comfortable with it. And I believe being, of the position that we're in here, the comfort level with us would be for it to be appropriated on a regular basis. I mean, a week or two isn't going to kill one way or the other, where the funds are going to be coming from that, and the mayor and yourself can come in front of the body and ask us to appropriate the funds from those funds until the funds are gone. And I think that would take care of this entire situation, because it, frankly, makes some of us feel a little uncomfortable.
And believe me, I understand that discomfort, and I think that has a lot to do with the unprecedented nature of this level of funding. I understand that. I've not been a city councilor, but as you know, I was a selectman for a very long time in the community where I live. So I understand that dynamic. I think what we're up against here is that we believe that the Department of Revenue has provided pretty concrete guidance and offered an interpretation of how the funds should be expended. So I would suggest to you that the mayor and I are not before you taking this position over another position. We believe that the Commonwealth has provided fairly narrow guidance that this is the way it should be done.
But this has nothing to do with the Commonwealth. This is the federal government. And based on conversations that I've had with other folks in other municipalities, in a sense, there is nothing concrete that says, the way Cambridge is handling this should be exact the same as Brockton or New Bedford or some of these other communities. Their form of government is a little different, and everybody handles money a little in a different way. So this is why I'm saying to you, it makes us feel more comfortable, because there's absolutely nothing there that says, this is how you must do it. It's a federal government that basically is saying, here are the funds to your municipality. You handle this as you would normally handle your funds. Because if the funds are coming in and you're expecting the council to accept the funds, then it has to be treated just like any other fund coming into the community, into the city. It cannot be, well, you accept it, but we're gonna run it the way we want to, because that defeats the purpose of us accepting it. Because if we're gonna accept the funds, then the council should have at least a vote to basically say, yes, we're okay with you using it for this. Not necessarily to tell you how to use the money, but you come with regular appropriations requests, and the council usually goes along with whatever appropriations you have. So I think it makes us, at least this one here, more comfortable knowing that there's that process in place versus, you know, here's the money, go out and do whatever you need to do with it. Because you're asking us to accept the money, and if we are to accept the money, there's a process that we normally use here in the city to accept and expand funds. So if you're asking us to do it, then you're basically putting it back on us to say, you know what, you're gonna make sure that you have some sort of a control over where those funds are gonna be spent. Because that's what we normally do anyways. You know, and this is not a grant, to say the least, because it's $35 million plus a whole bunch of other millions coming.
However, philosophically, in terms of how, in a perfect world, this would be handled, I think you make a lot of excellent points, Counselor. However, I would say that what the Commonwealth has said, and what they say does matter, because the Division of Local Services, the Department of Revenue, oversees the financial operations in all 351 communities in Massachusetts. And what they said in this document is that the guidance from the U.S. Treasury indicates that this is a federal grant. And so the provisions of Mass General Laws, Chapter 44, Section 53A, which I've provided to you, apply, period.
But Mr. Clarkson, I'm not arguing that point. What I'm saying, normally when we accept when we accept a grant, it's for bulletproof vests, it's for the roads, it's for this, it's for that, specifically for that. This is a pot of money that they're saying, here's a pot of money, and then there's gonna be projects coming out of those funds. So it's not the same, and that's the discussion we just had at the MMIA meeting the other day, because it's not the same thing. You are looking at a pot of money for you to slice up. You know, when you're talking about a specific grant, it comes in to buy pens, and you buy pens with the grant. But it never is, here's a sack of money, you figure out what to do with the sack. So if the state is telling us that, the state is not right either, because they're basically saying this is monies that you can use for a variety of things. So it cannot be treated as a grant, because a grant has something specific. And this has nothing specific. This is for you to use for a variety of things as we go down the line, you know, although they basically said, you can use it for this, you can use it for this, you can use it for that. You don't have to use it for everything that they're telling you to use it. But you're gonna pick and choose which ones you're using. That's why it has to be treated a little different than just the overall specific grant that you applied for, because this is not something that we applied for.
And we recognize most certainly that the difference in the dynamics of these funds versus, and that's a good example, Counselor, the bulletproof vest funds, which are before you tonight. We recognize the difference in that dynamic, and that's exactly why we've set in place the sort of process that I've shared with you a few times now. That's why we've gone and taken the extra step to seek the public's input on what's important to them. It's why I've mentioned to you on several occasions that the funding priorities of the council as a whole and of individual councilors are important in setting those funding priorities. So we recognize that this is not something that we've done before. And so we're trying hard, I think, to do it in a very transparent and collaborative way so that ultimately the money that does get spent, and by the way, not to further complicate things, but this afternoon, the President of the United States signed the infrastructure bill into law. So there's more money coming on the heels of the ARPA money. And so we're gonna be having this discussion over the next several years, I believe, of how best we're talking tens of millions of dollars. And so I think establishing a process that we agree with now will guide us over the next several years of how to expend an extraordinary amount of public funds.
And lastly, Mr. Chairman, besides the fact that we've already spent some of the money into contracts and some of these other things, what else do you fear from having a process set up where the mayor, the CFO comes before this body to basically ask for an appropriation to spend those funds that we are discussing?
I don't fear it at all, Councilor. In fact, I think having the council's input is not only important, it's necessary. I think we're trying to respect the guidance from the United States Treasury and from the Commonwealth. So I fully intend to be before you on a regular basis talking about how we intend to spend the money. Really, the question, and I think if we do this right as a group, it's a nuance. But the question becomes, is the spending predicated on an additional vote of the council or not? The kinds of things right now that are in the queue that the mayor's spoken about very publicly, fixing City Hall, renovating the Council on Aging, doing work to the War Memorial, distributing money to nonprofits in the city. I mean, those are all things that I think everybody can agree are necessary and important projects. Of all of the projects that I've seen, and we also solicited input from the department heads, of course. They are all projects that have been discussed for a long time in this city, and that I think there would be unanimous consent upon if it were indeed put to a vote. So in some ways, I think we're making a distinction without a difference, but I understand the push-pull between the legislative and the executive in trying to make sure we get this right.
Councilor, it's very similar. I think it's very similar to the Chapter 90 that we talked about. You talked about a little while ago. State gives the city of Brockton money, right? The mayor can figure out how to spend that, but it's working with all 11 city councilors on what roads are prioritized to spend the money. It's very similar to that. The money's a lot more, and we're having an application process in place for all the nonprofits that are going to be applying for that. But the collaboration and the collective viewpoints is key to it. So I'm not fearful of anything. Everything has to be above board, but we're just going by what the guidelines say. But, you know, I will tell you that I'm going to be here for the next 2 years. I will be working diligently with each and every one of you, and the money will be spent in the best interest of the city of Brockton. And that's really what I wanted to say. But it's very similar to when the money comes in, how do you spend the money? Well, the best way is to talk to the elected officials, fellow elected officials, on how the money should be spent throughout the 7 wards and 28 precincts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilor Mendez.
Yes, thank you so much. So at this point, we have to really accept this grant because the money has been in the account. The money has already been appropriated, means been used. And we need to make sure that we go ahead with this and accept this. I think the cautious and concern has been that whole language that it is at the sole discretion of the mayor, even though we're on the record tomorrow, he could say, okay, so I got the $1 million in my account. I don't have to do any more public input. And also the councilors don't really need to have any additional input. With knowing the mayor, I know that that is not going to be what he's going to be doing. But essentially, there's nothing in writing that really assures that you're going to be here on a monthly basis providing us updates and that the mayor will actually fall and do what he's supposed to be doing. At this point, is there any way that we can amend this order so that the language could make us, the councilors, feel more safer with this whole process, just to ensure that similar when we accept a grant and then we're appropriated, that will ensure that we'll be coming back before the councilors and letting us know, okay, so we put some of that money towards the union contract, so we're using it to renovate the city hall, or we're using it, and then we start accepting in that how we normally always do it. Can we amend this order just so that the language will make us, because otherwise we're just going to be here all night talking and debating the same issue that we've been doing it for weeks, and we're not getting ahead. So,
Legislative Council Resnick, I think, can weigh in on this because I spoke with her this afternoon about it, so.
Good evening, councilors. I just wanted to kind of just talk that part of the reason that we found this DLS was actually in response to Councilor Rodriguez's question about setting this up as a revolving fund, because this is actually more related, not like legal guidance, but it was actually more accounting principles. And one of the things that this guidance does provide is that they suggest that the money get put into a special revenue fund. So that's how we came across this DLS. And a special revenue fund, it's kind of just like the money's there and you can only use it for specific purposes. And what those specific purposes are designated by the ARPA legislation. So that is one of the hindrances of the mayor and his planning department is, and the oversight too, is that he can't just go and spend it on what he wants to spend it on. It is federal regulation. Some of the other oversights that will be upon the mayor's office includes a single audit. Because this money will be substantially over that threshold. So that is a process that they did advise municipalities to plan for. The guidance does specifically say that that at least as far as what I can tell, the only guidance that we have from the state is to treat this as being subject to the provisions of 53A, which relates to the acceptances of grants. I did look at that language. That language I think is in the packet that is in front of you, and that does say that the city can accept this money with approval of the mayor and the city council, and that it may be done without further appropriation. And so the discussion that I had with Councilor Farrell was about the use of the word may, and it doesn't say the word shall. And so Councilor Farrell asked about an amendment to the sole discretion language. And so
Well, specifically, I asked you, is there anything in the law that would prevent an amendment to the order that would indicate that the mayor would have the sole discretion to appropriate the money, but subject to city council approval, so that we would do exactly what we've done with the funding for the collective bargaining agreements?
I know, and I can read to you chapter 40, 453. It specifically says that that it may be expended by the department receiving the grant without further appropriation. That is a clear use of the word may. I think that kind of sets a option if the council wants to go forward with it as a single acceptance and no further appropriation. But I did provide Councilor Farrell with language if there was to be an amendment about city council approval.
If you could read that, I don't have it with me, but I know you've prepared something, and then it would be up to the body to consider it.
I don't think I actually wrote it down, but where it says at the sole discretion of the mayor, it would just say by approval of the mayor and city council.
What form of a motion? Want to make that a motion?
So how,
Well, let me see, who had the floor? I don't want to skip around here now.
I'll just take the agenda.
Councilor Mendes, were you, had you concluded?
Yes, I'm just confused with that amendment that, if you can just read it to make sure.
So where it says these funds are to be expended, it would say these funds are to be expended by the approval of the mayor and city council, and then everything else would be stricken. Because what that does, what exactly you would have is you would have an order accepting the gift, and then it would say that it actually is with further appropriation. That would be the effect of the amendment.
That's what we were trying to do the other day.
But that's not what was before you, so if that's the motion, if that's what you're accomplishing, that language would accomplish it. If that's your goal, that language would accomplish it.
So motion to amend the order to,
are you making a motion?
yes. But go ahead.
So just, I had a question, so on the motion, if,
Okay, we're on the order now. I don't know if we have a pending motion yet.
okay, I thought she was making a motion.
Oh, did you,
Yeah.
did you make that motion?
Motion to amend the order as she stated.
Second.
And that's, all right, now we have an amendment pending. If Councilor Mendes is through, I'll go to
Yes.
Councilor Thompson.
Thank you,
And
Mr. Chair.
Counselor.
Council, could you, what is the practical process now, if that amendment is approved?
So
Say, how does that work?
the money would go into, what I would see this as, because this is what the guidance says, the money would go into a special fund, special revenue fund. And then
We have to-
anytime any expenditures would come from that, you'd have to have a request come from the mayor's office. It would have to be approved by the city council. The other suggestion would be, is you could also do like a threshold. I just have experience in monitoring the CARES Act and what Plymouth County did, and some of the nuances and the payments that had to get made. I mean, it takes forever. And so I don't know if you really want to be getting orders from the mayor. This is a large amount of money. I think that this is, just so you know what you're voting on, you have this money. You potentially also have this order affecting the money that the county will be providing as well, which is much more than what's before you tonight, and then any additional money that comes from the infrastructure bill. So that is all going to be in front of you, every dollar spent. If that's how you want it to do. That's just, the paperwork is substantial.
So with this special revenue fund, is that's something we have to create?
Yeah, and a special revenue fund, it has a more elaborate name than it really needs, but it just basically, it's a separate fund, so you have a separate accounting system, and you can only use it for designated purposes. And those designated purposes come from the ARPA language.
I mean, I think we all need a little more information on what exactly this process is. I mean, is this something we can bifurcate, accept these funds, and then make a decision on whether we want to move forward with a special revenue fund, or exactly how we want the accountability from the mayor's office?
So I wouldn't deviate from the special revenue fund, like that is clear cut. DOR tells the CFO.
We have it in a special revenue fund.
Yeah, and then that's how they're told to do it. So that's why when you suggest the revolving fund, it's like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do. You want it in a special revenue fund. So I wouldn't suggest deviating from that.
And then we'd be adding the additional, the additional requirement of approval. That's
Correct.
basically all we'd be doing, is adding that additional requirement.
Every time that the mayor's office would like to make an expense from that funding, you would have an order before the city council, and then you would have to approve it for them to be able to expend the money, which I don't know, I just like you to have everything on the plate. That could slow down a nonprofit's ability to move readily available funds. I mean, if it's without city council approval and their office deems it appropriate and there's the need there and they've met the criteria that the mayor's looking for, Troy can cut the check. If you add language that it's subject to city council approval, it's going to come before the city council, it's going to go to FinCom, it's going to go back to the city council, it has to get advertised, there's a period of time for the mayor to veto it. So that is an extended process, which could be a hindrance to like a $5,000 grant to a restaurant that needs it for the summertime so that they can continue their operations. Those are just all of the things that are part of your considerations, but it's just.
Can that process come later? Are we able to readdress that issue, accept it, and then us as a council figure out, I mean, this is kind of all happening out here in open council, but are we then be able to make, whether we want a cap, how much is that cap, or whether we want this at all? Is that something that we can do later?
Just in response to legislative counsel, you can always pass something under suspension of the rules. If something came in for $5,000 and it was desperately needed, we could do that. So let me try to share the conversation I had with her today to the very best of my memory, and then I think, I owe all of you that as chair. I called Attorney Resnick. One of my concerns was, I don't know how long the mayor and Mr. Clarkson will be around. Will they be here for the next 2 years? I mean, I'm not being funny, but well, you don't know, but somebody will call you up, make you a judge.
I'll be all right.
And Mr. Clarkson, I mean, we have to plan, we have to set a precedent that will carry on long before we've all left, long before they've gone on to greater professional opportunities. That was my first concern. My second concern was, we heard a lot about transparency. If we go the route of having an appropriation come in, and then we evaluate it and approve it, It's posted on the agenda, it's posted on the website. People can come in and watch the meeting. We take a vote in open session. If we just turn over $34 million to be divvied up in an office somewhere, and then we suddenly, a month or two later, get notice this is how it's being spent, we're gonna get the calls. Well, why did you spend money there? Why didn't I have any input? You know, why didn't the council do this? Someone is going to accuse us of kind of abdicating our responsibility, and this is all of the conversation that I had with her. So I asked, is there anything in the law that would prevent us from approving each appropriation as we have just done with all of the collective bargaining agreements, the ARPA funds? And that's how we came up with what she just read to you, that the mayor would still have sole discretion where he wants to spend the money. The only thing is he'd put in an order, as they did with the money for the union contracts. We'd vote on it. And I mean, I don't see any of us as obstructionists. I really don't. But that was the substance of the conversation, if I have, have I repeated it accurately?
Yep.
Okay, with that, I'm done, and let me see, Councilor Thompson, you still had the floor.
I would just say, is this council going to entertain a cap? If that's the case, do we find it, relevant or to have a cap? That way, those smaller transactions can be a little more flexible, or?
I'll let Mr. Mayor step in here for a minute.
Thank you, Attorney Resnick. So, thank you, Counselor. I mean, first of all, if you're going to contemplate a cap, a couple good examples would be the cable, $750,000 for the cable. Anything over that, I have to come back before you. So if you're going to contemplate that, that's within your purview, absolutely within your purview. But I'm just concerned about time is of the essence. If all of a sudden a 50,000 anti-gun violence application comes in and we want to do it and they need it within the next 10 days, we can't do that under the legislative process. It has to go to council, has to be filed. Even if you take it under suspension, time becomes an issue. So I'm not saying that you shouldn't put a cap if that's up to you. That's why you're elected in your capacity. But I think you'd have to look at some of the, some examples. And 750 is what it is on the cable. And then there's 250 on, what's that, Troy?
There's a few different revolving funds, but the abandoned building revolving.
Yeah, that's a 250. And I do want to just commend Council Mendez. I'll make a pledge right now. I'll come back every other, the second FinCom of every month to give a status update on ARPA. It will either be me personally or it will be Troy. We need to make sure we get this right. But I am fearful that if it's, we have to keep going back for every dollar, that's going to clog the problem, and it's going to create a nuisance for the people that need it the most. Thank you.
Councilor Cardozo.
Okay. So first of all, I want to clarify tonight with this order, I don't believe we've accepted this as a grant yet.
That's correct.
So this order doesn't state that that's what we're doing. It states that we're authorizing the appropriations, right? Or is that under this, should we assume it's under Chapter 44?
No, the item number 462, it's sixth on the agenda. It indicates that we're authorizing an appropriation from unappropriated estimated receipts, American Rescue Plan Act.
Right, but
Well,
it's not.
It doesn't say grant.
Right, so that's the first step. We haven't even accepted the funds as a grant yet. And we're moving on to the order. It's just so complicated, and I think that I just don't feel comfortable voting on number 6 as it's stated. Because it's not, we haven't even accepted the grant. We've already spent some of the money with the union contracts, and now we're asking to accept this order as stated. I just think it needs to be clarified. The other thing is, I agree with Council President as far as taking item under the suspension of the rules. There's nothing urgent that's going to need to happen from these funds with the nonprofits, okay? Nonprofits, you know, we want to be able to support them, but, you know, prevention work is over time. It's not something that you're doing right away because there's an emergency situation. So I run a nonprofit, so I know. So I think that it makes sense to have the city come in front of us periodically to ask for these appropriations. But as this order is stated tonight, I don't think we can vote on it the way that it's stated.
Councilor Mendez, then I have a question for the mayor.
Yeah, we have a lot of eyes, a lot of people has been looking into this grant, and we've been getting requests from the community, as you stated. So the more transparent we are with this, the better off we are. But we have to move on with this tonight, and I think that the language that the Legislative Council suggested is appropriate, because that gives the mayor sole discretion to use it as the requirements per the grant, but it also requires to come before the city council if we can use it under the suspension of the rules. But I think that we appropriate all the fundings anyways, and that's what we're here for, and it's good to have every money coming before the city council. So I hope that we can resolve this and vote on it tonight as amended.
Mr. Mayor, the chair has a question for you. If we adopt the amendment that has been moved by Councilor Mendez, but we further amended that to say that any appropriation in excess of $1 million would come to us, would that provide the flexibility that you would need for emergencies?
I think it would. I also think that Councilor Cardoza isn't wrong. If you're going to make a modification, you might want to word it grant in there as well. I just talked to the CFO about that. Listen, we all want to get to yes. So whatever it is to get to yes, that's what we want to do. I do think $1 million makes much more sense. I mean, I'll give you an example. When the Charity Guild needed 100 grand because their freezer broke, we needed to give it in real time. It needed to happen quickly. So I would say yes to your question, Mr. Chairman. But again, I would defer to your attorney on the verbiage.
Is there any objection if we take a 2-minute recess to work that out with with Legislative Council? And that gives me a chance to step out of the room for a minute, so. All right, we'll be in a 2-minute recess. Microphones are on. All right, call the meeting back from recess, and Legislative Council Resnick.
So just procedurally, just so we know, there is an open motion on the table, which is inconsistent with what I have here. So then if this is to be adopted, we would just need to have that motion withdrawn. But you don't need to do that yet. Let me just explain to you what I've drafted up. What I drafted up was in response to Councilor Cardoza's question about making this kind of clarified as to what's really happening here. And so basically what happens here is you accept the grant in accordance with Chapter 44, Section 53A, which is the appropriate statutory reference, in that same amount, and it provides that you would put those funds into a special revenue fund called the ARPA Fund, and any appropriations from the ARPA grant in excess of, I just wrote in $1 million, shall be subject to City Council approval. I can read that fully when it's time to make the amendment, but I just wanted you to have that aware so that you had an informed opinion as to whether or not to withdraw your original motion.
Well, a quick question on the title of it, the upper funds, because if we're looking for additional federal monies that are coming down the pipeline, they're not going to be coming down for ARPA funds. They're going to be for infrastructure and some of these other things that are coming down the pipeline. Wouldn't we just kind of leave it since we're setting this stuff?
Every money that comes in as a grant or award will get a new order. And if you want it to go into that fund, we can look to see if we can do that. They might need to go in a separate special fund, but then you can just erase the amount that's coming in. Let's say your next batch of money is 50 million. Here's hoping you change in 50 million, accept it, and you can change that easily. But any new money that comes in has a whole
No, but I'm just
separate
saying
order.
to remove the word ARPA fund.
The reason that it says ARPA fund is that if you look at your agenda, that's what it's referred to already. That's what they call it.
Okay.
Okay, so Councilor Mendez, would you be willing to withdraw your original motion?
I think that $1 million is too high. I would be willing to withdraw for 500,000.
Like we're at,
I do think
Price
$1
is
million
Right or
is too high to go in excess of $1 million, but in excess of 500,000 then.
Well, if you withdraw your original motion, you could make this new motion and put 500,000.
Okay, I will draw my
All right, with
original
the
motion
second-
then.
Who was the second?
was me.
Councilor Rodriguez?
Second.
Yes. So Councilor Mendez withdraws her original motion. The second is Councilor Rodriguez. He withdraws his second. And now we go back to what will be a new motion and.
So I make a motion to amend this order. Before I make, are we including the word grant in that new order as is stated by Councilor Cardozo? Since we're amending, maybe we should just do it as clear as possible. So I'll make
Yes.
a motion as amended, and if you can read the appropriate amendment with the
With
500,
so this is what it would read.
and include the word grant.
Yep, in accordance with the general laws of Massachusetts, Chapter 44, Section 53A, recommend that the City Council accept the grant amount up to $34,590,793 from unappropriated estimated receipts, American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, for purposes of, including but not limited to, COVID response mitigation and prevention activities. Said fund shall be held in a special revenue fund called the ARPA Fund. Any appropriation from the ARPA grant in excess of $500,000 shall be subject to City Council approval.
Second.
Okay, motion by,
On the motion.
Motion.
I did have a question before we went to recess,
sure,
but
Councilor Azak?
I've been meaning to ask this all evening, and I know Troy does a really great job comparing communities, but so what have other cities similar to us done, and will this work in your experience? Do you think this is going to work? And I know the mayor, at the beginning of this order, he mentioned that Attorney Resnick's worked hard on this, so I'm figuring, in your professional opinions, is this the best route to go? And first off, what other communities, Troy, what have they done, and has it worked?
The couple of cities that I looked at left it with the discretion of the mayor. But cities have a little bit more, like, the cities are just situated differently. Every city has a different form of government, so, but the cities that I looked at left it with the mayor.
Can you tell, example, which cities?
I think it was, I looked at like New Bedford, Lowell, maybe it was Lawrence. It was just a couple.
Okay. and they all left it as is, as a,
Yep, but I don't know specifically how those forms of governments works. I don't know if it's the same, subject to city council approval on a regular basis on funding mechanisms. In terms of like professional opinion, I can only tell you my legal opinion, and I think that this provides a legal standard that is sound.
the amendment with the 500,000, you think that's, okay. And Troy, with your professional opinion? Thank you, Attorney Resnick.
To address the first question, Counselor, I looked at communities similar to the Legislative Council and would offer the same opinion. Cities and towns are very, very different. So in towns, generally, they're not getting the kind of money we're getting, first of all. And that appropriation authority for this kind of thing is reserved, granted to the Board of Selectmen and not town meeting. But it's very different here. Be that as it may, though, I think I would suggest the more important question you ask is, can we work with this framework? And I'll speak for myself, but I think what I heard the mayor say a few minutes ago is, we're all about getting to yes. And then during the break, we talked about working together and compromise. So my answer is an unequivocal yes. I think the threshold is critically important. I happen to think that 500 is too low, but you know, in a sense of working together and collaborating, that will give us the flexibility that if a nonprofit, and we've worked very hard on putting together a structure that we can get money to nonprofits, and if they need money for something and it's immediate, then that gives us the ability to do that, or to fund an unforeseen need, you know, that's 50,000 or whatever the amount is. And so I think having that flexibility and that ability to be nimble is very important. But for major capital projects, for fixing City Hall, which is probably a $5 million ordeal, we'd want your input anyway. So I think this is a good compromise that we can work with, and still, as the mayor pledged, to have regular communication and come back so that we're talking about what we should spend the money on before we file an order. That's really the important thing, is that the public sees that we're working together. And I've been here long enough that you know that's how I operate, and you certainly know that that's how Mayor Sullivan operates.
So thank you, and I think that's really reassuring. So thank you, Mayor. I think keeping the conversation open, letting us know in advance is really important to us and the community. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr.
Council
Chairman.
Monahan.
Yes, Troy. That's you. You said 500 is low, you think is low? But I know the cable is 750, so would that make more sense not to, if we don't have to, you know, do anything for 750 with cable, with this amount of money, I mean, is that?
You know, I mean, I'll tell you, it's intuitive on my part, right? It feels right. $1,500,000, 750 is a good compromise. Maybe that's where you go. But, you know, I think that's based, though, really on my reaction to it. I don't have the list of projects before me, but I have them committed to memory enough to know that just having some flexibility is important, I think.
Okay, that's my thought. That's all. I just saw the cable was 750, so I figured that. All right, thank you.
Council Mendez.
I will withdraw my motion to 500,000 and amend it to the 750 as suggested.
Second.
Okay, we'll just accept it as a friendly amendment, if you don't mind.
Thank you.
Under Robert's rules, so we're
Thank
now
you.
at 750. This is like, almost like, let's make a deal.
Door number one.
Let's open box.
That remind me of Bob Barker, though, from The Price is Right. I think that's fine. If the legislative body's 750, that's great. It mirrors what we do for cable. And again, whoever the president's going to be going in, put us on the docket. The last FinCom of every month, second FinCom of every month going forward for ARPA. It's just be a standing resolve update relative to ARPA funds. But I want to thank you. This is an important conversation. It's not drawn out. It's appropriate. So thank you very much, councilors.
Councilor Nicastro.
Thank you. On the motion, Mayor Sullivan, you are tasked with an amazing opportunity here with all of these funds flowing into the city. And I know you will take this very seriously. We also take seriously being the stewards of the purse for the city of Brockton. And I hope you understand this is not personal to
Oh,
you.
no, I don't take, I was up there 14 years, Counsel. I'd be
Right,
doing the
right.
same thing if I was
And
up there.
The words sole discretion and $34 million in the same sentence was freaking me out big time, to tell you the truth. And I think what we fashioned here, all working together, is very acceptable. And if it's not, if you find you are fettered by it, you can always come back.
Absolutely. And one other thing, Counsel, is because it's such an important, we, Troy and I, and hopefully we find that candidate, almost like a clerk of the work, someone that's designated sole purpose for projects on ARPA, because to try to say the building department's going to have to handle this, or the planning department, it's not going to happen that way. It has to be done professional and in a really cyclical way. So believe me, I don't take offense to that at all, Counsel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, so we're voting first on the amendment. All right, so on the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? Unanimous approval for the amendment. Now we go back to the order as amended. We're now voting on the order as amended, $34,590,793 with a cap of $750,000, over which the mayor will have to return with an order and a request for an appropriation. Is there a motion to recommend that favorably?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion made and properly seconded to recommend that favorably. All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Thank you, Council. Nice compromise, everyone. Nice.
Thanks, Mr. Condon.
Speaking of Mr. Condon, next one up, please, Madam Clerk.
Order that the following named sum be in the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer of $2 million from the retirement fund contributory pensions to the stabilization fund. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Jeannie Martineau, Executive Director, Brockton Retirement.
Mr. Chairman, good evening. I am really honored to have Mr. Condon here, who served our city so well for so many years. He is a member duly on the board at the retirement, so Jeannie couldn't be here today, but Mr. Condon is here in her stead. $2 million, in essence, is the money left over from the budget that we had already budgeted relative to the refinance we did from the bonds. So the $2 million is left over that we don't have to give the retirement board, and we'd rather put that in the stabilization fund. I know Troy, in his capacity as CFO, sent you a summary, but Mr. Condon's been very patient tonight, so if you have any questions, please ask him of Mr. Condon. Thank you.
Filling in for Ms. Martineau is, backed by popular demand, is Mr. Condon. So any questions for Mr. Condon?
Motion to recommend favorably.
No, I have a question.
On the motion, Councilor Cardozo.
On the stabilization fund, hi, Mr. Condon, how are you? So this is going from the retirement fund to stabilization fund, and I notice on number 8, the next item out, we're doing sort of the same thing, but going to a pension stabilization fund. Can you explain the difference between?
Well, I think the first appropriation is to the city's regular stabilization fund for $2 million, which would boost your regular stabilization fund by that amount of money. It's coming from the budget for the city's pension board. The second amount of money is going to a dedicated reserve fund, a contingency reserve fund, to back up the bonds that you've just issued in case there are adverse circumstances or losses in the investment of it, or adverse circumstances with respect to the actuarial liability of the system, and that would help provide a cushion in case those kinds of things came up. So they're two separate funds. The source of both is the pension appropriation from this year. So what you've got, the pension appropriation is essentially, a portion is called the normal cost, and that's the ongoing pension liability for people that are working now to be paid in the future, and then your unfunded liability is what wasn't put aside to pay for those future costs for people who had already retired. So the pension bond is solving that. That's getting the Brockton share of that unfunded liability almost 100% funded. So that amount of money that was in the budget to go toward the unfunded liability for this fiscal year is no longer needed for that. It's being provided by the bond. Therefore, it's free, and the board agrees with the decision to set aside that reserve fund. It's good. It's a good, healthy move for the city to make, and we are fully funded for the Brockton liability with the receipt of those funds, pension bond funds. So we're in favor of both moves.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to clarify, so Number 7 is just going to the general stabilization fund, and the second one to a specific pension stabilization fund.
Yes, those are two separate funds.
Okay, okay.
All right, so we have a motion to recommend favorably on the first item. All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Item number 8.
Ordered that the following named sum be and the same is hereby transferred as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Transfer the $20 million from the Retirement Fund Contributory Pensions to Pension Stabilization Fund 7251. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Jeannie Martineau, Executive Director, Brockton Retirement.
Any questions on this one, Counselor? Counselor Cardoza?
Just a quick question. What is the interest rate on this one?
Well, the bond has different interest rates for each year that the bonds are due up until the 2036 year, the final payout. But over the life of the bond, based on the amount that was borrowed and the issuance cost, the interest rate, the average interest rate, called the true interest cost, was just over 2.6%, 2.62%. So you got a very, very, very favorable interest rate when you borrow. We were in the market at a good time.
Okay, thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably on the motion, Counselor, yeah. I almost said Counselor Clarkson.
Geez, you almost got out of it. You want to speak more? What the heck?
One quick point on this one. Thank you for indulging me, because I think it's important. This is an historic vote that you're about to take, and so I just really wanted to take a very brief moment to really highlight what you're doing right now. When you put this money in, and Mr. Conan is absolutely correct. He was on our working group and worked tirelessly alongside with me and other members of the team, folks from the mayor's office, for the last year to put this deal together. But when you take this vote, it will be in a separate pension stabilization fund, and that's what we offered to do to mitigate against any market corrections in the future. But what's critically important is that it will still be reserves of the city. So the city of Brockton, once you take this vote, will have more money in reserves than at any time in its history. You will have more money set aside than at any time in the history of the city of Brockton. And that's something that Jay Condon and Bob Sullivan and all of you can be proud of, because those are affirmative steps that you're taking to secure the financial future of this city. And I don't think you can overstate how important and how historic that is. Most communities that are doing this nationwide are borrowing extra money to then create a reserve fund. The fact that we're doing it with cash sets us apart and led our underwriter to say that this pension plan project was the best of the best that they've seen in the United States. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge not only the effort that went into this project, but the fact that we came up with a way to do it, frankly, better than anyone else. And that's something of which we can all be proud. Thank you.
Okay, on the motion, all in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Recommended favorably. Item number 9.
Ordered that the following named sum be and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Appropriation of $85,000 from Massachusetts Department of Public Health Legislative Earmark Funding Grant to the Mayor's Office Legislative Earmark Funding Grant Fund. These grant funds will be used to support the Champion Program. There is no match required. Invited Honorable Mayor Robert Sullivan, Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the state delegation, Rep. Cronin, Leader Cronin, soon to be Ambassador Ireland Cronin, Rep. Cassidy, Rep. Dubois, and Senator Brady. This is an earmark. The late mayor, Bill Carpenter, created the Champion Plan. It was carried on under Mayor Rodriguez, and I proudly carried on as well. So this is Beacon Hill money coming to us, substantial money to help relative to the purpose of the plan.
Councilor Cardoza.
I only have one problem with this, is that the contract manager is still listed as Corin Capiello, who's no longer with us. And this was just signed 10/21/21, so.
Yeah, thank you, Councilor. This is Scrivener's error. It'll be relative to Jasmine Bradshire, who's been in my office, and she is the new social services director. She took over for Corin.
Okay, but legally, can we accept this when, you know, the contract manager is someone that doesn't work here anymore?
We have a replacement. We could change that. It's up to the will of the council if you want to change it or not.
Maybe the attorney Resnick can guide us, I don't.
Same office, right?
She's
Grant this to the city.
She was in the position at the time, right?
No, I think this is just a
Whoever's in
letter.
the position at the time.
At the time.
But her name is stated on it.
Councilors, you could recommend it favorably, and then by Monday, have a letter submitted that Corin Capiello is not the grant coordinator and the newly designated person is, so that, we could do that. Because this isn't a final vote tonight.
Okay.
All right, motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. The next one up.
Ordered that the city council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $20,000 from In Good Health to Brockton Police Department. The donation will be used for canine-related items as needed for the Brockton Police Department. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, councilors. Before you was a donation that was offered, $20,000 to supplement the Brockton K-9 unit, but I also want to articulate what this is specifically earmarked for. This will go for the Brockton Police Department to ascertain a K-9 unit, but a K-9 unit that's what's known out there as a comfort dog. And the dog will be used in a passive manner in the schools to build confidence with kids who have some, might have some psychological issues, some PTSD issues. And it also is going to be there to build trust between the police officers assigned to the school and these things are being used throughout the country. There's some very positive things coming about with it. School officials are very pro supporting this program. So with this donation, Brockton Police Department is going to try that. I want you to know that although this is a K-9 unit, it will not have any specialized training in any kind of police work. These dogs are specifically selected and trained for their, their obedience and their kindness. And we're looking at, we have a dog, it would be a black lab that we will be using in the schools, and they won't require any of the training or any of the other issues aside from food and vet bills with the other dogs. Answer any questions.
Could he go to the mayor's office?
He can.
He needs a little compassion in there.
For a motion?
Motion to recommend favorably.
All right, motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor?
Thank you.
All opposed? It is a vote. Item number 11.
Ordered that the city council authorize the acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $100 from Quincy Credit Union to the Brockton Police Department. The donation will be used for canine-related items as needed for the Brockton Police Department. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police.
Chief, anything special about this?
No, just a donation that we received.
Motion to recommend
Second.
favorably.
Second.
A motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Item number 12.
Ordered that the following name, sum be, and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Appropriation of $50,000 from the Executive Office of Public Safety and Security's Office of Grants and Research, OGR, Fiscal 22 Municipal Road Safety MRS Grant to the Brockton Police Department Fiscal 22 Municipal Road Safety MRS Grant Fund of $36,456.67. Of these grant funds will be used to fund overtime shifts during 5 enforcement campaigns. Winter impaired driving in December of 2021, distracted driving in April of 2022, click it or ticket in May of 2022, summer speed in June of 2022, and summer impaired driving in August and September of 2022. $6,028.26 will be used for the bike unit to conduct bike rodeos. $6,028.27 will be used for overtime shifts for pedestrian and bike safety enforcement. And $1,186.80 will be used to purchase 750 bicycle lights for youth. And $300 will be used to print 750 resource cards to be distributed during the bike rodeo. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer. Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, and Michelle St. James Grant, Coordinator, Brockton Police Department.
Good evening, Ms. St. James.
Good evening, Mr. Chair.
I see you've been busy.
I need to write much shorter summaries. I am sorry for that. This is the second year we've gotten this grant. This is how the state now does the traffic grants. It's changed a little bit this year. Like with many grants, they are doing a switch a little bit away from enforcement. So while there is enforcement, obviously we're branching out with the bike rodeos to educate youth on the proper ways to ride a bike. Obviously, as you see, we have the problems with the dirt bikes, so if we can start the kids on bikes a little bit better, hopefully we can ease that issue down the line. Any questions?
Councilor Thompson.
Ms. St. James, thank you for appearing tonight, as always. I just never heard the term bike rodeo. What is that?
A bike rodeo, it is essentially, we'll have members of our bike unit go, and they call it a rodeo because it's supposed to be fun. So you'll see the bike unit, they will show some tricks, thus the rodeo, but mostly it's about showing how to safely ride, making sure the kids know all of the hand signals and know the proper way to ride. It's just a way to make it more fun for them.
Understood. Thank you.
Did you say tricks?
Sure.
Guys?
Yeah, the bike unit will do a few tricks for them. They've already promised.
Okay, is there a motion to recommend
President,
favorably?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question.
All right, Councilor Azak.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. St. James. Quick question. So in this order, it says that there's some of these funds are going to print cards. So do you already have a date? And is there already a date for this?
No, the cards won't be talking about when the rodeo is. The cards, we did this with a different grant a couple years ago where Sergeant Amaral from the police department had basically the rules of the road written down in a way that appealed to kids. So we would do that same thing and distribute them at the bike rodeo. So it doesn't have to have a date.
So how do we get this out to the youth? Is it through the schools, or is it?
We distributed them, the last time we distributed them during pedestrian and bike shifts, and we would do that, and also we would do it at the bike rodeos. It's a way for police to interact in a positive way with kids also.
So it's separate from the bike, so the bike rodeo is scheduled, and then then you distribute information.
Correct.
There, okay,
Yes.
so, okay, very good, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Anyone else?
Motion to recommend
Second.
favorably.
All right, motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Item number, next one up.
13.
Order that the following named sum be and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Appropriation of $15,449.50 from the U.S. Department of Justice Fiscal 21 Bulletproof Vest Program Grant to the Brockton Police Department Fiscal 21 Bulletproof Vest Program Grant Fund. These grant funds are used for the reimbursement of 50% of the cost of the bulletproof vest for Brockton police officers whose vests need to be replaced in the upcoming cycle. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, and Michelle St. James, Grant Coordinator, Brockton Police Department.
Ms. St. James, go ahead.
This year, the department needs to purchase 40 vests. That's why the number is a little bit higher than it has been. And there's usually some confusion with this grant about why it isn't a reimbursement grant. The way this grant works is we buy the vests. We usually order them in February. They come in either May or early summer. And then, and only then, can we use the grant funds. So while the application period that we apply is usually August, we get the grant now, and then then it just sits there and we can't touch it until we've actually made the purchase, the check has cleared, and then we can get 50% of the cost of the vest back. That's why it's not considered a match. It's just a reimbursement.
Councilor Azak.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Ms. St. James. So I never realized until a few years ago that the vests have a lifespan, which is
5 years.
5 years. And I know in past years, we've donated the Brockton Police Department's old vests to different countries. Are we still doing that?
I have no idea. That's police procedure, so I would have to ask the equipment officer about that.
Okay.
Sorry.
No worries, but I'll ask as well. I know in past years we've donated them, so which I thought was interesting, 'cause if they had a lifespan and we donated them, how useful.
You want one of those expired ones?
Hopefully I don't need a vest at all. Thank you, thank you.
Motion recommend favorably.
Motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Item 14.
Order that the city council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of a donation in the amount of $23 from Joe Montero to the Brockton Police Department. The donation will be used for the K-9-related items as needed for the Brockton Police Department. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Emmanuel Gomes, Chief of Police, and Joe Montero.
Councilors, this is a unique donation. This happened to be a sweet elderly gentleman that called me and insisted in partaking in assisting the Brockton Police Department. So I wanted to put this forward so you'd know that it took place and we have these kind of people in our community. Thank you.
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Item 15, we have already handled. So we go on to item 16.
Order that the city council authorizes the acceptance and expenditure of the total grant funds in the amount of $18,750 from the Massachusetts Emergency Management Agency Hazard Mitigation Grant to the Department of Public Works Hazard Mitigation Grant Fund. The grant funds will be used to update the local multi-hazard mitigation plan. There is a 25% required in-kind match. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, and Patrick Hill, Interim DPW Commissioner.
Mr. Clarkson had to leave, however, we have Mr. Cirasulo here, and we have the commissioner here. So I don't know if you want to offer some remarks, Commissioner.
I'll only say that this presentation was made to the city council at the end of September by Chike Odenakwi, the city engineer. In order to accept the grant funds, we need a council approval, so.
Motion to recommend favorably.
All right, motion made and properly seconded to recommend favorably. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. 17.
Order that the following name sum be and the same is hereby appropriated as the same was submitted by the mayor as follows. Appropriation of $250,000 from the United States Environmental Protection Agency, EPA Cleanup Grant, to the Department of Planning and Economic Development, EPA Cleanup Grant Fund. The grant funds will be used to remediate the environmental concerns at the Cochrane Building at 308 Montella Street. This grant requires a $50,000 match. Funds from the Mass Development Brownfield Grant Award will be used as a source of this match. Invited Troy Clarkson, Chief Financial Officer, Robert May, Director of Planning and Economic Development.
Mr. May, I shouldn't do this, and maybe I'm tired, but you're batting cleanup, so go ahead.
Good evening, councilors. Thank you. We have a really great grant opportunity here from US EPA. These are very rare for people to get. There were only 5 awarded in New England, and we were one of them. And so I respectfully request that you approve this.
What's it being used for?
Okay, I don't know.
Brownfield cleanup at Corcoran Building.
I'll go to Councilor Nicastro, Thompson, and then Azak.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. May. I just have a question, because this is all very engineering-like and technical and stuff, and why would your department be in charge of this as opposed to engineering and DPW?
Well, Brownfield's cleanup has been run by our department on several projects for multiple years now. We've been heading up the US EPA assessment grant, and now we've written and been awarded a US EPA cleanup grant. It doesn't need a engineer, a civil engineer to facilitate this process.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Councilor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. May.
Sir.
Just looking at the time frame, it looks like potentially that any actual cleanup would happen 2023, or it looks like that's kind of the time frame here. Is that your understanding?
We should be, actually, the cleanup should start in calendar year 2022, which is potentially fiscal year 2023.
Okay.
If it's after July.
Okay, so we expect if we accept this grant, that the brownfield cleanup would actually happen sometime next year.
I expect it to be sometime in June or July, well, actually July of next year.
It said it was basically a 3-week project to complete it.
Correct. We may be even be able to move faster than that.
And then also, I know we earlier accepted a Mass DEP grant, and this is basically saying that for the same Cochrane building.
Yes.
So we can
Mass
actually.
Development Grant.
The Mass Development Grant. So we can actually use that grant as the match for this federal grant. Is that correct? Perfect.
Leveraging.
Perfect. I appreciate your time. Thank you, Mr. May. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Razak.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Mr. May.
Good evening.
Just a quick question. With this grant, is there any strings tied to it? Like, I believe with the previous one, like the city, if we sold it or if we had to keep.
The Mass Development Grant that we got is a reimbursable grant. But by the time we show all of the work that has gone into bringing that building up to a sellable state, we won't owe any money on it.
Okay, so
And I believe Mr. Clarkson, or Mr., you're not Mr. Clarkson. Troy had discussed that in our last presentation. Now, we are able to use those funds, though, to match the US EPA grant, which requires a 20% match, or 25%. So we're not out any money at all.
So we're planning on keeping this the Corcoran building?
Well, we don't plan on keeping the Corcoran building, but it will be disposed of. But in all of the expenses of maintaining the building, keeping it weathers tight, doing the remediation, keeping electricity on, all those expenses get deducted from the 250 Mass Development Grant. So there's really nothing to pay back.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Motion to recommend favorably?
Second.
On the motion,
On the motion, Councilor Ianieri.
how many times are we gonna clean this building? Been sitting that way for 30-something years.
Well, once and for all,
Once,
we will be done.
then why are we bothering? Just dispose of it, just knock it down.
Oh, it's way
Please.
too expensive to knock down.
It's too late.
It would be cost prohibitive for somebody to knock it down and redevelop the site.
Well, then what are we gonna make out of it?
I think that we've shown it to several commercial developers, and there's an opportunity for a good job creation project there.
I find that hard to believe, and I bet you 10 years from now, if I was to ride back here 10 years from now, that same building will be sitting there.
Well, it'll be sitting there, it'll be
It
occupied.
will be, it won't be, and it won't be nothing.
It'll be occupied.
Okay, yeah, I've heard it more and more, over and over and over.
Okay.
So I think it's a waste of time, waste of time. Great for the grant, but do something else. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Is there a motion?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Motion made and properly.
Yeah, there was one already.
There was one on the floor, but
You saying in favor?
No, did you need to be recognized?
No, everybody
Oh, I'm sorry.
recognizes me.
All in favor? All opposed? It is a vote. Okay. Item number 18.
Resolved to invite a representative of Brockton Community Access, BCA, to appear before the Finance Committee to discuss the television coverage of the September 14th preliminary election. Invited Carl Pride, Executive Director of BCA.
Good evening, Mr. Pride.
Good evening. Good evening.
Last but not least.
Yes, yes.
Councilors, I don't know if you want to ask Mr. Pride any questions, or Councilor Azak, go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Pride, and welcome. I believe this is your first time in front, first time in front of us. So welcome to Council Chambers, welcome to Brockton and BCA. So this question, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to answer it, because I know that, you're fairly new at BCA, but maybe you've asked before you came here tonight, but has BCA ever covered the preliminary elections in Brockton?
I can answer that. I know that they have at times. I know that they haven't every time.
Okay. And I know you did cover them the night of the election, actual election, November 2nd, correct?
We did.
but that's not before us this evening. So was there a reason why they weren't covered this past, this year? Why this year, BCA decided not to cover the preliminary election?
So, to indirectly answer or answer it directly, it's about awareness of what we are. When I first got hired, one of the things I said is that I'm going to shake things up a bit. And then the preliminary elections happened, and then I got a few calls saying, oh, you shook things up a little too much. That being said, it was not an attempt to not do anything. We, at that particular time, I was new here, and I didn't have people stepping up saying, I want to be on the camera, I want to be in front of people telling them about this. And that's where I took it from. The advantage of what happened was, as a result, people started knocking on the door saying, I want to get involved, and we were able to put something together for election night. So that, there's actually a silver lining there. The fact is, we actually did do something for the preliminary, which was we did put up the data that night. We just didn't have someone in the studio saying, what the numbers were.
Okay, I'm actually an avid watcher. BCA's on Channel 12, 9's on all the time, 98 even in my house. But so, and I'm assuming COVID had something to do with it as well. I mean, it's.
I'm sure. I wasn't here during all of COVID. I had only started about a week and a half before that event.
So no, and it's understandable. I just have a quick question, which isn't related to the preliminary election, but I'm hoping, and I'm not sure if you'd be able to answer this or not, but your position as executive director is that permanent, or are they?
I'm considered the interim executive director. I actually call myself the media center director. And actually, Joe Miranda, the president of the board, is here, and they are actively searching for a permanent executive director.
Okay. And this is just a comment I'm going to put out there, and I have spoken, I mentioned it to Mr. Miranda and other board members, but I have constituents come up to us all the time, and, they tell us they've submitted their resumes for some of these positions. So I would just ask publicly that, a lot of times they say they don't even get an interview, whether it's, I'm not just saying BCA, but in the city in general. And as city councilors, we're not involved with the hiring and firing process, especially not with BCA, because it doesn't even fall in City Hall. So I would just ask that, if we have a lot of talented people in the city, and sometimes just giving them the opportunity to come before you and interview them would really be a great chance to let them know.
Absolutely. As a separate nonprofit in Brockton, we pride ourselves on looking to Brockton first.
Okay. We have a lot of talented people. I know I have some in my ward, so I just wanted to make sure I put that out there. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Councilor Yaneri and then Council Mendes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. How are you?
I'm awesome.
That's great. Now, you said you arrived here a week or two before the primary?
Yeah.
Okay. And did I hear you say you're the interim?
Yep.
Okay. Would permanent be an issue? I mean, would permanent possibly be something you'd be looking at as well, or?
Well, we've been talking about, I'm going to not answer that.
You don't have to.
It's not that I wouldn't be interested. However, really, my role is not I don't run a nonprofit. I run community TV.
Okay.
And there's a difference between an executive director and the person that runs TV.
Okay, so I guess my next question is, are you living here in the city of Brockton?
No, I'm
Or
not.
you're traveling back and forth from a different location?
I'm traveling back and forth from California.
That's a hell of a ride every day, yeah?
Yeah, well, as a result of COVID, we've learned that you can work and manage remotely a good portion of your time.
Okay, I mean,
So-
I'm just overwhelmed with the fact that, you know, somebody would be interested in doing that, but obviously you must be, so, you know, welcome aboard, and, but.
Yeah,
if you-
I've worked for BCA twice in the last 20 years.
The RBCA? or-
RBCA, yep.
Really?
I was the assistant general manager 10 years ago, and 20 years ago, I was the head of training.
Yeah, I don't recall that, for all the years I've sat here. Yeah, I don't recall that, because we don't have control over that either. You know, that's not our control, but still, it was just boggled in my mind that, you know, somebody was going that type of distance, but as long as you can get the job done and do what they're looking for to be done, then, you know, I wish you the best here, but, you know, appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr.
Councilor
Chairman.
Mendez?
Yes, since we're talking about that, just a quick question. Are you subject to the residency requirement when hired by BCA, meaning that you would have to live in the city of Brockton?
BCA is a separate nonprofit, so
So they're not subject to
They're-
the residency?
they're
Okay.
not subject to that.
Okay. Is BCA fully staffed at the moment?
Nope.
I was going to say that because I was at an event, and the person there told me that someone from BCA was coming to cover it, and I believe they had to go to another game last minute and couldn't cover the event. So I figured that was probably understaffed.
Yeah, it's a constant battle of figuring out where to put
Yes.
the different pieces. It's a small staff. It's a total staff of 7 currently. And that includes doing all the programming that's covering city councils, school committees, and not to mention what we do with the mayor's office. I mean, it's a lot. It's a lot, you know, over 4 channels.
Do you have the funding to hire more people, or are we just expecting to operate as best as we can under the limited staffing?
We currently, I'm gonna defer.
Sure.
Sorry, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. In order to answer that question, that goes with funding. If you guys remember last time I was here in front of you guys, I talked about funding and the amount of money that BCA does receive from Comcast. And we asked for capital funding, and we still haven't received it. And I asked that maybe about 2 years ago. Because we had a lot of repairs to do in our building, so we had to spend some of that money doing repairs, and also that prevents us hiring and a lot of the employees.
So at this point, we don't have the funding to hire more people.
No, not right now. But it's hard to say are we fully staffed. Only that's missing is an executive director. He's currently filling that role. When I took over 2 years ago, we only had 3 staff. Okay? And right now we have about 7. So we're doing a lot better than we were 2 years ago.
And I can see the improvement. The podcast room is very nice, and you guys are always encouraging people from the community to come and get trained and be able to have their shows, and is available to pretty much nonprofits in the community to come and use that service, and I think more people should take advantage of that. The other question that I have is regarding translation. Sometimes the programs and the shows, like the churches, they're in different languages, and the Americans out there that don't speak another language, they like to understand. Is that too much, like for the subtitles and other language, just to be in English so people can understand? I've had that complaint.
It does cost money to do it, like Carl's mentioned. With funding, anything is possible.
That would be nice.
Definitely look into that.
Yeah, because I really think it's such a diverse community, and we have shows in so many different languages. I sometimes don't understand, and I would like to be able to watch it. But if you don't speak the language, and there's no subtitle, then you just change the channel. So that would be a nice feature to add if we at some point could have that. But I want to congratulate, the election night was much, much better. I loved how you guys had it at City Hall and also in studio and be able to communicate. So a phenomenal job. Much, much better than, unfortunately, the preliminary. It passed. We can't go back, but hopefully going forward that we can remedy these things and ensure that we provide more coverage to the residents, especially in a preliminary election, which is so crucial. Not many people go out to vote, so that's when we need to use our local cable to spread that message and bring awareness to the city. And believe it or not, people do watch it more than you would ever think, because I go out talking to the residents, they tell me all the time they do watch our local cables and channels, so thank you for everything. Thank you.
Councilor Councilor Rodriguez, followed by Councilor Monahan.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a perception problem with BCA. And I can speak as, not an expert, but I was part of the board when it was first founded. I've been producing a show there for quite some time. But the function of BCA is not necessarily to cover city events. They do it technically as a bonus in a way, because the number one responsibility of BCA when those funds, and if you're aware how the funds work, it's the funds that come in, the taxpayers aren't paying for BCA. What pays for BCA is the ratepayers, the folks that actually pay Comcast, and within a contract with the city, by law, a certain percentage of that fund is supposed to come for local cable production. And the way it works is the local cable production is for volunteers to come in and produce local television, local shows. They are also supposed to cover government, public, and educational access. That's their function, to be honest with you. I know that we have talked a lot about them not covering here, not covering there, because in reality, their number one responsibility is to make sure that those spaces are available for access producers to produce their local community access shows. And I think we got to kind of get away from thinking that city government actually oversees BCA, because we don't. We do not appropriate funds for BCA. Those funds come directly from the cable, in our case, Comcast cable subscribers, who pay a small fee that goes to BCA for its operation. So it doesn't come out of, I think what happened in the past with us shifting, and this thing happened during the Harrington administration. In the past, the entire amount of money that came out of Comcast used to go directly to BCA and kept the city out of the loop. So during that process, because a lot of people felt we kind of held strong in terms of negotiating with Comcast, there was a little more money that was going to come out of that whole negotiation, and we felt that a portion of that money needed to go to the schools, a portion needed to go to city government itself, and that is when we decided to chop up that sum of money. Prior to that, city government was totally out of it. The city negotiates with Comcast, gives the contract to Comcast, and Comcast, in its turn, takes a small amount of those funds and returns it to the city for cable production. And I think that's what we need to kind of keep in mind, because I've sat here and I hear that people saying, that thinking that we're actually appropriating taxpayers' money to BCA or cable production in this community, and that's never been the case, and it will not be the case as long as the process, that's how it works. So I think we got to keep that in mind, that yes, they can do a little bit more, but in reality, what they're doing is basically the mandate from within the FCC delineation of what those funds are supposed to be for. So I think it's important for us to understand, and the folks that are watching us at home, so that they know that we're not using city government money for BCA. Those funds come directly from Comcast and not from the coffers of the taxpayers in this community. And what they do with that is subject to whatever that board decides that they need to do. The board is appointed by the mayor and with our consent. But as far as that goes, that board runs that entity. You know, we are city government. The only issue we actually have with this is by the next time that one of the persons come before us to be appointed by the mayors, for us to kind of hold them to account what we want them to do, but not necessarily to tell them what to do, because that's not really our function. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Just one thing I would say, Councilor Rodriguez, it is taxpayer money because 5% of the revenues from Comcast or Xfinity come into the city treasury. We then appropriate $650,000 of that money.
It's not taxpayers' money, it's the ratepayers' money.
Yeah, but they're taxpayers in the city.
No, they're ratepayers. They could be businesses that come in from somewhere else that pays cable, not necessarily
They
the
expect
taxpayers.
something for their money, I guess. But anyway, Councilor Cardoza? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilor Monahan, go ahead.
I know I'm not invisible.
That's true.
Good evening, gentlemen. Going off of Councilor Rodriguez, I understand what he's saying, but I also know that over the past, how many years they've been there, local government, elections, information, I have my ward meetings on, the council at large, they have their meetings on cable, so I'm hoping that that's going to continue. I think a bunch of us really didn't know who to contact. I know COVID, it sort of messed everything up. But going forward, I'm hoping we can continue those meetings on being aired, depending on how much you have as far as the staffing goes.
Absolutely, and to that point, Councilman Thompson had his Ward 5 meeting, a virtual Ward 5 meeting, where he came into our now podcast room and learned how to operate, and was able to operate with some support from us.
Yep.
However, able to operate his his ward meeting directly from our podcast. I'm opening that up to all of you to come in. We'll give you a little bit of training, and you can sit there and talk to your ward directly. Easy peasy.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's just that with, even though we're more advanced in technology, we have less communication than we ever had.
Absolutely.
And we really need you guys to be there. I think that's going to be the main source of information, because the newspaper, we have no local radio station basically anymore, and we're going to, people in the city are going to be looking more towards cable to get their information.
Absolutely, and you know, we do go out and cover events. However, as Councilman Rodriguez was saying, our main focus has been, or is, to train the community how to do TV themselves. That is our main focus.
Right. But I'm saying, and over the years, it really has been a big help politically to the citizens to know what's going on. So it's really, it's been helpful, and they get a ton of viewers, obviously, like Council Mendez said, people do watch, and we still need you guys to help us out, so. Do we contact you if we want to have a ward meeting? Who do we talk to specifically?
You could talk to me, just call our number, 508-580-2228, or you can check us out on the web at bcatv.org.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I withdraw my question.
Anyone else?
Motion to recommend favorably.
Second.
Okay. On the motion, I would just like to say I appreciate speaking with you, Mr. Pride. I will tell you, I think, in my opinion, I hope the council next year will have a contract with you. I can't think of another nonprofit where we'd give $650,000 and say, here, go spend it as you see fit. I think there ought to be a contract as to exactly what you're going to provide and how you're going to provide it. And the last thing I would say is, if you're getting $650,000, I think you own the building. I don't, and you have so few employees, I'm not quite sure where the money is going. So I'd like to see the budget. I'd like to see a couple of annual budgets for BCA. I'm sure you'd be willing to share that information because it's money that we appropriate, so. But there's been a motion to recommend favorably. All those in favor? All those opposed? It is a vote. Thank you. Councilors, just a reminder, important. Next Monday, 6 o'clock, tax rate hearing here in City Council chamber. It's that agonizing meeting we have once a year, November 22nd, 6 p.m. here in the council chamber. Councilor Azak.
I know it's been a long night, but I would like a moment of council's recognition.
Go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank the Brockton Garden Club for their work in preparing City Hall Plaza for Veterans Day. It looked really beautiful. Saturday, November 27th, the city is having a community holiday celebration from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. with a parade starting at 1 p.m. There's a lot of fun events and activities, so please visit the city website for more information. I know one of the events is the Garden Club, DW Fields Park Association, and the Brockton Library Foundation are hosting free activities for kids at the main library that day starting at 10 a.m. Hope to see everybody there. Thank you.
Councilor Rodriguez.
I too would like a moment of privilege.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Okay. I just want to invite my colleagues here in the chambers and as well as the folks that are watching us at home that this Friday we're holding an event at the Perfect Place, Fred's Place down on the south side of the city. We are putting together a fundraiser event to help the individuals that were affected by the fire on Main Street, on North Main Street several weeks ago. There's 18 families affected by this and somewhere around 28 individuals were affected by this. And these folks lost everything. The fire basically took away their belongings. When you hear someone say, "I lost everything," and they came out of the building with just basically what they had on, it just kind of breaks your heart in a sense. And you've got a lot of individuals who didn't believe in the banking system. Some of them were saving their monies inside of their own places, and they're going through a real tough time. So if we could, if you have time, it's a free event. We're asking for basically cash donation so that we can evenly divide the funds among the 18 families affected by this. So if you can find it in your heart, to please come down to Fred's Place on Friday from 8 o'clock on until we get every single person through and donating. There's some music, some finger foods going around, and it's a free event, and we're asking for donations. And anybody that's watching us at home, they can donate it through the Cape Verdean Association if they so feel inclined to get a tax donation out of it. But we're doing this to try to help this family out that was highly affected by the storm and also the fires that we had here in the city. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Anything else? If not, councilors, did you want to be recognized? Councilors, thank you for a long and professional meeting. There being no further business, the Finance Committee meeting is adjourned.